Hello everyone. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So before you get cozy, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. The town of Millhaven sat beside Lake Calder, a vast, steel-gray body of water that locals claimed had moods of its own. On calm days, it looked peaceful, reflecting pine-covered hills and the scattered wooden docks that stretched into the shallows. But when storms rolled in, the lake churned violently, as if something beneath its surface was trying to claw its way out. Millhaven wasn't always beside a lake. 52 years earlier, it had been built inside the valley now buried under Calder's dark waters. The original town, Old Millhaven, had been flooded when a massive dam was constructed to supply electricity and irrigation to surrounding counties. Residents were forced to relocate to higher ground. Bulldozers tore through homes. Streets were abandoned. Churches were left standing until the water swallowed them whole. Official records called it necessary progress. Locals called it a mistake. And every few years, the lake reminded them why. Detective Ryan Mercer had never believed the stories. He grew up 2 towns over and remembered them as nothing more than old fishermen's ghost tales told around campfires. But as he drove into Millhaven on a fog-choked October morning, those stories felt uncomfortably close to reality. Ryan had been transferred after solving a string of cold case disappearances in Brookridge County. His reputation was simple, patient, relentless, and immune to superstition. He didn't know that Millhaven specialized in destroying that kind of certainty. The call that brought him here was strange even by his standards. A fishing boat had been discovered drifting near the center of Lake Calder. The engine was still running. The radio crackled with static. Inside the boat were 3 life jackets and a camera filled with photos that made seasoned officers physically sick. Ryan pulled into the Millhaven Sheriff's Department parking lot. The building was small, old, and painted a faded blue that had begun peeling like dried skin. Waiting outside was Sheriff Tom Halvorsen, a heavy-set man in his late 50s with tired eyes and the posture of someone who carried too many secrets. "You Mercer?" Halvorsen asked, extending a rough hand. Ryan nodded. "That's me. What exactly am I walking into here?" Halvorsen exhaled slowly. "You ever hear of Old Millhaven?" Ryan shrugged. "Just rumors. Something about the town being flooded." Halvorsen nodded grimly. "Yeah, flooded. And every decade or so, something from that old town comes back." Ryan frowned. "You're talking about bodies resurfacing." Halvorsen hesitated. "I'm talking about people who were never reported missing showing up, dead, wearing clothes 50 years out of date." Ryan stared at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. The evidence room smelled like stale coffee and mildew. Halvorsen unlocked a metal cabinet and pulled out a waterproof evidence case. Inside was the camera recovered from the fishing boat. Ryan slipped on gloves and turned it on. The screen flickered to life. The first few photos showed 3 fishermen standing proudly on their boat, smiling under cloudy skies. Their names were listed in the case file: Grant Leland, Victor Shaw, and Marcus Dean. All local men. All experienced anglers. Ryan clicked to the next photo. The smiles were gone. The 3 men stood frozen, staring behind the camera as if someone, or something, had stepped onto the boat with them. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with horror. Ryan felt a knot form in his stomach. The next photo was worse. It showed the lake's surface behind them. And breaking through the water were rooftops. Old rooftops. Church steeples. Street lamps. A full town skyline, rising through the lake like it had never been submerged. Ryan lowered the camera slowly. "That's fake," he said. "Photoshopped or hallucination all." "Keep scrolling," Halvorsen interrupted quietly. Ryan hesitated, then pressed the button again. The final photo made his breath catch. The 3 fishermen were kneeling at the edge of the boat. Their backs faced the camera. Standing waist-deep in the lake water in front of them were people. Dozens of them. Men, women, children. Their skin was gray and bloated. Their clothes looked decades old. Their eyes were open, too open, and their expressions were locked in silent agony. And they were reaching toward the boat. Ryan set the camera down carefully. "Where are the fishermen now?" he asked. Halvorsen swallowed. Boat was empty when it was found. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just those photos. Ryan rubbed his jaw slowly. And this happens often. Halvorsen didn't answer immediately. He walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were dozens of missing persons reports dating back 30 years. Every case shared one thing in common. The victims had last been seen near Lake Calder. Later that afternoon, Ryan stood on the dock overlooking the lake. Fog rolled across the water in slow, ghost-like waves. The surface looked calm, too calm. He could almost imagine rooftops hiding just beneath it, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer. Footsteps approached behind him. "You're the new detective." Ryan turned to see a woman in her early 30s with sharp features and wind-tangled brown hair. She carried a camera slung over her shoulder and wore a heavy jacket dusted with lake mist. "Detective Ryan Mercer," he said. "And you are?" "Lena Cross," she replied. "Local journalist. I've been covering Lake Calder disappearances for 6 years." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Disappearances or ghost stories?" Lena's expression hardened. "3 of those missing people were my family," she said flatly. Ryan immediately regretted the tone of his question. "I'm sorry," he said. Lena nodded slightly, accepting the apology but not relaxing. "You should know something," she continued. "The town doesn't talk about Old Millhaven anymore. They pretend it never existed. But the lake remembers. And every time water levels drop during drought years, pieces of the old town resurface." Ryan leaned against the dock railing. "You think the fishermen saw Old Millhaven rise out of the water?" "I don't think," Lena said quietly. "I know." Ryan studied her carefully. "What aren't you telling me?" She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. It showed a half-submerged church steeple sticking out of the lake during a drought 8 years earlier. Standing in the doorway of the church were silhouettes of people staring toward the camera. "They weren't reflections," Lena whispered. "They moved. We saw them." Ryan stared at the photo, his pulse quickening. Why hasn't anyone investigated this seriously? Lena gave a bitter laugh. "They did. Once. State divers went down 20 years ago to map Old Millhaven. Only one diver came back alive. He refused to speak about what he saw. Retired 2 weeks later. Moved across the country." Ryan folded his arms, staring out at the water again. "Then we talked to him." Lena shook her head slowly. "He died last year." Ryan cursed under his breath. That evening, Ryan visited the fishermen's homes. Grant Leland's wife answered the door, her eyes red and hollow. "He texted me right before sunset," she said, clutching her phone. "He said they found something incredible. He sent one message, just 3 words." She handed Ryan the phone. The message read, "The town is back." Ryan's throat tightened. "Did he say anything else?" he asked gently. She nodded. "He called right after sending that. I could hear water and voices. Not yelling. Just whispering. Then he said something I didn't understand." "What did he say?" Her lips trembled. "He said, they never left. They've been waiting for us to return." That night, Ryan sat alone in his temporary motel room overlooking the lake. Rain began tapping against the window. The storm clouds rolled in quickly, turning the water black under flashes of lightning. He studied the fisherman's camera again, replaying the photos frame by frame. Something new caught his attention. In the final photo, the one with the drowned figures, there was someone standing slightly behind the others. Taller, dressed in older clothing than the rest. A man wearing what looked like a preacher's collar. Ryan zoomed in. The man's face was clearer than the others. And unlike the drowned figures, he was smiling. Ryan felt ice slide down his spine. He flipped through Old Town records again and found a photograph of Old Millhaven's church from 1971. Standing in front of the congregation was the town's pastor, Reverend Elias Crow. Ryan compared the faces. They were identical. The storm outside intensified, thunder rattling the motel walls. The lake surged violently in the distance, waves crashing against the docks. Ryan walked to the window, staring at the black water churning under lightning flashes. For a split second, he thought he saw something beneath the surface. Shapes. Movement. Structures rising slowly upward, like a town trying to breathe again after decades underwater. He blinked. The shapes were gone. But his phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a message from Sheriff Halvorsen. Water levels dropping fast. Damn control says it shouldn't be possible. You need to get down here now. Ryan grabbed his coat and rushed outside into the storm. As he drove toward the lake, sirens wailed across Millhaven, echoing through the rain-soaked streets. When he reached the shoreline, dozens of townspeople stood gathered along the docks, staring into the water in horrified silence. Ryan stepped beside Halvorsen. "What's happening?" The sheriff pointed toward the center of the lake. Ryan followed his finger, and felt his blood turn to ice. Breaking through the storm-tossed water, rooftops were emerging. Streetlights, a clock tower, and the steeple of old Millhaven Church, rising slowly from the depths like something resurrected. Beside him, Lena whispered, her voice shaking. "It's happening again." Lightning cracked across the sky, and as the church doorway cleared the waterline, Ryan swore he saw figures standing inside it, watching the shore, waiting. The snow hadn't stopped since the night Daniel Harrow vanished. By the time morning came, Pine Hollow looked like it had been buried under a white, suffocating blanket. The town's main street, usually alive with delivery trucks and early commuters, sat eerily quiet. Even the church bell that rang every morning at 8 seemed muted, as if the snow had swallowed the sound whole. Detective Laura Kessler arrived at Harrow Street just after sunrise. Her boots crunched through thick layers of snow as she approached Daniel Harrow's house, a narrow, two-story home with pale blue siding and frost clinging to every window. Yellow police tape fluttered weakly in the wind, the only color breaking the monochrome landscape. She paused at the front gate. The patrol report had been brief. Daniel Harrow, age 34. Lived alone. Worked remotely as a software engineer. Last confirmed sighting, 9:17 p.m. the previous night. After that, nothing. But there was one detail that kept repeating in every officer's notes. The front door camera footage. Laura ducked under the tape and stepped onto the porch. Officer Trent Miller stood waiting, hands buried deep inside his jacket pockets, breath fogging in the freezing air. "You're here early," he said. "I like answers," Laura replied. "You said the camera caught something strange." Trent nodded slowly. "Yeah, strange doesn't even cover it." He unlocked the front door and stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and pine-scented cleaner. The living room looked untouched, neatly folded blanket on the couch, laptop resting on the coffee table, television paused on a streaming menu. A half-finished mug of coffee sat beside the laptop, a thin film of ice forming across its surface. Laura moved carefully through the room. "Any signs of forced entry?" she asked. "No," Trent said. "Doors were locked. Windows sealed. Alarm system still armed." Laura frowned. "So he just walked out?" "That's what it looks like." She stopped near the wall-mounted security monitor. A small digital hub connected to the door camera blinked with a steady blue light. Beside it sat a USB drive in an evidence bag. "That the footage?" she asked. Trent handed it to her. "Tech pulled it this morning. You'll want to watch it." They set up in the Harrow dining room, converting the space into a temporary viewing station. Laura plugged the drive into her department-issued laptop while Trent leaned against the wall, arms folded tightly. The file contained only one recording from the previous night. Timestamp, 9:14 p.m. Laura pressed play. The footage showed Daniel's front porch illuminated by a single overhead light. Snow fell steadily, swirling in thick, slow spirals. For nearly 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the porch light flickered. Daniel appeared in the frame, stepping outside wearing a dark sweater and jeans. He looked calm, casual. He carried his phone in one hand and a steaming mug in the other. Laura leaned closer. Daniel walked down the porch steps and stood near the walkway, staring into the snow-covered street. His expression shifted slowly, confusion, then concern. He turned his head slightly, like he was listening to something just out of range of the microphone. Trent spoke quietly behind her. "Wait for it." Daniel raised his phone, as if recording or using its flashlight. He stepped forward, one step, then another, until he reached the edge of the driveway. He froze. Laura noticed it instantly. Daniel wasn't looking at the street. He was staring directly at the front door camera. His face filled with something Laura couldn't immediately name. Fear, but deeper than fear. Recognition. Then Daniel mouthed 3 silent words. Laura rewound the clip and zoomed in. His lips moved slowly, deliberately. "It followed me." A chill ran down Laura's spine. Daniel suddenly spun around, facing the empty street behind him. His coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering across the snow-covered pavement. He stumbled backward, as if something unseen had lunged toward him. Then the camera glitched. Static filled the screen for 3 seconds. When the image returned, Daniel was gone. Laura replayed the last 5 seconds 3 times. "Where does the camera coverage end?" she asked. Trent pointed toward the edge of the frame. "Right past the mailbox. After that, it's blind." "No footprints?" she asked. "That's the part that doesn't make sense." He handed her a stack of crime scene photos. Laura flipped through them slowly. The first showed the driveway covered in fresh snow. The second captured the shattered mug. Coffee stains had frozen into dark amber streaks across the white surface. The third photo made her pause. Only one set of footprints appeared in the snow. Daniel's. They led from the porch, halfway down the driveway, then stopped abruptly. No drag marks. No second set of tracks. Just footprints ending mid-stride, like Daniel had simply vanished into thin air. Laura leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "When was the snowfall heaviest?" she asked. "Between midnight and 4, Trent replied. "But officers got here at 10:30. They confirmed the prints were already like that." Laura stared at the photo longer. Something was wrong with the final footprint. It was deeper than the others. As if Daniel had suddenly shifted all his weight onto one foot, right before disappearing. By late afternoon, Laura and Trent were at the Pine Hollow Police Department reviewing Daniel Harrow's background. "Clean record," Trent said, scrolling through his tablet. "No financial problems. No recent conflicts. No family nearby." "Friends?" Laura asked. "Couple co-workers from his remote job. Mostly online contact." Laura nodded absent-mindedly as she flipped through Daniel's phone records. One call caught her attention immediately. Timestamp, 9:09 p.m. 4 minutes before the camera footage began. The number wasn't saved in Daniel's contacts. "Did we trace this?" she asked. Trent shook his head. "Burner phone. Purchased 2 weeks ago at a gas station outside town." Laura dialed the number anyway. It rang once, then disconnected. She stared at the screen. "That's not possible," Trent said. "The phone's inactive." Laura didn't answer. She was already scrolling through Daniel's recent browsing history retrieved from his laptop. Most of it looked normal: work documents, coding forums, food delivery orders. Then she found a folder labeled Archive. Inside were dozens of downloaded video files. Each file had a timestamp in its title. Laura clicked the first one. The footage showed Daniel's living room, recorded from inside the house. He sat on his couch typing on his laptop. Nothing unusual. But the timestamp revealed something unsettling. The video had been recorded 3 days earlier, and it wasn't Daniel's camera angle. It was positioned high in the corner of the room, somewhere near the ceiling. Laura checked the next video. Same angle, same room. But this time, Daniel wasn't alone. At 2:13 a.m., Daniel entered the room holding a flashlight. He slowly scanned the ceiling, eyes wide, breathing fast. He walked directly beneath the camera's blind spot, then suddenly turned and stared straight into the lens. "How did he know?" Trent whispered. Laura didn't answer. She opened another file. This one was dated the night before Daniel disappeared. The camera angle had shifted. Now it showed Daniel's bedroom. He lay asleep under heavy blankets. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. For nearly 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then the blankets moved. Not Daniel moving. Something pressing down from above, slowly forming the outline of a hand across the fabric covering his chest. Daniel's eyes snapped open. He sat upright instantly, gasping, staring around the room, but the pressure mark disappeared before he could react. Laura slammed the laptop shut. "That wasn't pulled from his devices," she said quietly. Trent swallowed. "You think someone was watching him?" Laura stared at the closed laptop. "No," she said. "I think someone was inside his house." That evening, they returned to Daniel's home with a full forensic team. Every inch of the ceiling, attic, and ventilation system was inspected. Officers dismantled light fixtures, checked insulation layers, and scanned for hidden wiring. Nothing. No cameras. No transmitters. No signs anyone had ever been there. Frustration spread through the house like a virus. By midnight, most of the team had packed up, leaving Laura alone in the living room reviewing notes. The house felt colder now, quieter. The ticking of Daniel's kitchen clock echoed through the empty space. She walked slowly toward the hallway leading to Daniel's bedroom. Something felt off. She stopped halfway down the hall. The air smelled faintly metallic, like overheated wires. Laura turned toward the ceiling vent above her. A soft humming noise vibrated through the metal grate, barely audible, like distant static. She grabbed a chair from the kitchen and climbed onto it. Using her flashlight, she peered inside the vent. At first, she saw nothing but darkness and dust. Then her beam caught something reflective. A tiny lens, perfectly embedded deep inside the ventilation shaft. Laura's breath caught. "Trent!" she shouted. He rushed into the hallway moments later as Laura stepped down, eyes locked on the vent. "There's a camera," she said. Trent climbed onto the chair and shone his own flashlight inside. "Jesus," he whispered. The device was no bigger than a coin, wired into the metal framework of the duct. It looked professionally installed, hidden in a place no casual search would ever find. How long could that have been there? Trent asked. Laura didn't respond, because her eyes had drifted to something else. Scratched into the metal frame beside the camera were tiny markings, almost invisible unless light hit them at the right angle. She leaned closer. The scratches formed numbers. 9.17. The exact timestamp Daniel Harrow disappeared. Back at the station, forensic technicians carefully dismantled the device. "It's not transmitting to any local receiver," one technician explained. "It's routing through a remote encrypted server. Whoever installed this knew exactly what they were doing." "Can you trace the signal?" Laura asked. The technician hesitated. "We're trying." Hours passed. Finally, just before dawn, the technician waved Laura over. "We got something," he said. He rotated his monitor toward her. A digital map glowed across the screen. A blinking red dot marked the signal's origin. Laura stared at the location. It wasn't out of town. It wasn't even across the state. The signal was coming from a building just 4 blocks away from Daniel Harrow's house. Laura read the address slowly, her stomach tightening. "Isn't that?" Trent began. Laura nodded. The signal originated from Pine Hollow's oldest abandoned structure, St. Augustine Medical Center, closed for over 15 years, rumored to have been shut down after a series of unexplained patient deaths and a fire that destroyed the upper floors. Trent looked uneasy. That place was condemned. No electricity, no security, nothing. Laura grabbed her coat. "Then someone's been hiding there," she said. Outside, the storm had finally stopped. The sky hung low and gray as they drove toward the abandoned hospital. Snow-covered trees lined the road like silent witnesses, their branches heavy and unmoving. The building came into view slowly through the fog. St. Augustine stood like a copse of concrete and broken glass, its blackened windows staring down at the empty parking lot. Rusted signage creaked in the wind, barely hanging from the cracked facade. Laura parked near the front entrance. The hospital doors were chained shut, but the chain had been cut recently. Fresh metal edges glinted beneath a layer of frost. Trent reached for his flashlight. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. Laura stared at the dark hallway visible through the shattered glass doors. Somewhere inside that building, someone had been watching Daniel Harrow. Maybe longer than anyone could imagine. She drew her weapon slowly. "Let's find out," she said. As they stepped toward the entrance, neither of them noticed the faint blinking red light glowing high above the hospital doors. A camera, recording their arrival. The glass doors of St. Augustine Medical Center groaned as Detective Laura Kessler pushed them open. Rusted hinges protested, echoing through the empty lobby like a warning. The air inside was colder than outside. Not winter cold. Dead cold. The kind that clung to skin and seeped into bone. Laura stepped cautiously across shattered tiles while Trent followed closely behind, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Dust particles floated lazily in the air, disturbed only by their movement. The hospital smelled of mold, rot, and something faintly chemical, like long-dried antiseptic. "This place gives me a bad feeling," Trent muttered. Laura didn't respond. Her eyes were scanning everything, the broken reception desk, overturned wheelchairs, faded patient signs hanging crookedly from the ceiling. Most of the building had clearly been abandoned for years, but something felt wrong. Too clean. The dust on the floor had been disturbed recently. Footprints, Laura said quietly. Trent angled his flashlight downward. Faint impressions marked the grime-covered tiles, leading deeper into the lobby. They weren't clear enough to identify shoe type, but they were fresh. Someone's definitely been here, Trent said. Laura nodded and followed the trail toward a dark hallway labeled Patient Wards, East Wing. As they moved deeper inside, the hospital seemed to swallow sound. Even their footsteps felt muted, like the building itself was listening. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with doors bearing rusted room numbers. Some hung open, revealing empty beds and overturned medical equipment. Others remained shut, paint peeling from their surfaces like shedding skin. Halfway down the corridor, Laura stopped abruptly. She crouched beside the wall. Scratched into the faded paint were dozens of tiny tally marks. Groups of 5, repeated over and over. Trent counted silently. That's at least 70. Laura traced one set of scratches with her gloved finger. The grooves were fresh, cut deep enough to expose clean plaster beneath the paint. These weren't made years ago, she said. Before Trent could respond, a metallic clatter echoed somewhere deeper in the building. Both detectives froze. The sound came again, faint, rhythmic, like something dragging across a hard surface. Laura raised her weapon. "Hello!" Trent called out. Silence answered. They moved forward slowly, following the noise until it led them to a stairwell door hanging slightly ajar. The dragging sound stopped. Laura pressed her hand against the door and pushed it open. The stairwell spiraled upward into darkness and downward into deeper blackness. Their flashlights barely illuminated the concrete steps stained with old watermarks and crumbling plaster. "Signal traced to upper floors, right?" Trent asked. Laura nodded. "Third or fourth level." Tech wasn't exact. They began climbing. Each step echoed sharply, the sound bouncing between the narrow walls. Halfway to the second floor, Laura's flashlight caught something lying on one of the steps. A shoe. A single men's sneaker, dust-covered but relatively intact. Trent crouched beside it. "This isn't old," he said. "Rubber soles still flexible." Laura turned it over carefully. The inside label read D. Harrow. Her stomach tightened. "This was Daniel's," she said. They exchanged a silent look before continuing upward. The second-floor corridor was darker than the lobby. Several ceiling panels had collapsed, allowing snow to drift inside through broken windows. The wind whistled faintly through the hallway, carrying whispers that sounded almost like distant voices. Laura followed the footprint trail again. It led toward a nurse's station near the center of the floor. The station looked oddly untouched. Dust covered most surfaces, but the desk itself had been wiped clean recently. A portable battery pack sat on the counter, wires trailing behind it toward a cluster of monitors mounted to the wall. Laura approached slowly. The screens flickered to life as she stepped closer. Security feeds. Multiple camera angles displayed various rooms inside Daniel Harrow's house. Living room, bedroom, hallway, even the front porch. Trent stared in disbelief. They were watching him from here. Laura leaned closer to the monitors. Each feed had a timestamp, and every feed was still running. "They alive," she whispered. A sudden crackling noise burst from a speaker mounted beneath the screens. Static filled the air, followed by a distorted whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Trent spun around, flashlight sweeping wildly across the empty hallway. "Who's there?" he shouted. The voice returned, clearer this time. He didn't listen either. Laura stepped closer to the speaker. "Where is Daniel Harrow?" Silence lingered for several seconds. Then the monitors flickered rapidly, cycling through camera feeds faster and faster until they stopped on a single image. Daniel Harrow. The footage showed him sitting in a metal chair inside a dimly lit room. His face looked pale, eyes hollow with exhaustion. His wrists were strapped to the chair with thick leather restraints. The timestamp read live. Trent grabbed Laura's arm. "That's him. That's happening right now." Laura scanned the screen for clues. The room behind Daniel was bare except for cracked tile flooring and peeling surgical lights hanging from the ceiling. "Where is that room?" she demanded. The speaker crackled again. "Fourth floor. Operating wing." The monitors went black. They sprinted toward the stairwell. Laura's pulse thundered in her ears as they climbed. Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Daniel still alive but barely. Whoever had taken him possibly still inside the building. When they reached the third-floor landing, Trent suddenly grabbed her arm. "Wait!" Laura turned. The hallway ahead was lined with hospital gurneys, arranged side by side across the corridor like a barricade. Each gurney was covered with stained white sheets, the shapes beneath them unmistakably human-sized. Laura approached cautiously and lifted one sheet. Empty, but the mattress beneath it was soaked with dark brown stains. "Blood," Trent whispered. Laura moved past the barricade quickly. The fourth-floor stairwell door stood slightly open, faint light flickering beyond it. They pushed through. The fourth floor smelled different. Stronger chemicals. Fresh electricity. Unlike the rest of the hospital, parts of this level had been restored. Extension cords snaked across the floor, powering surgical lamps and monitoring equipment. Several operating rooms lined the hallway, their glass windows fogged with condensation. Laura followed the hum of electricity until it led her to a heavy double door marked Surgery 4. She pressed her ear against it. A faint voice came from inside. Daniel's voice. "Please. I don't understand." Laura signaled Trent. 3, 2, 1. They burst through the doors. The operating room lights blinded them momentarily. When Laura's vision adjusted, her breath caught in her throat. Daniel Harrow sat in the center of the room, exactly as the monitor had shown. Leather restraints bound his arms and legs to a reinforced metal chair. His face was bruised, eyes darting wildly as he saw them. "Police!" Laura shouted. "Daniel, stay calm." But Daniel didn't look relieved. He looked terrified. "Get out!" he screamed. "You need to leave right now." Trent rushed forward, reaching for the restraints. "You're safe. We're here to—" "No!" Daniel shouted. "It's still here." The overhead lights flickered violently. A loud metallic slam echoed behind them. Laura spun around just as the double doors slammed shut on their own. The locks snapped into place with a mechanical click. Trent yanked at the handle. They are sealed. The lights dimmed, leaving only a faint surgical lamp illuminating Daniel's trembling face. Then the intercom crackled alive. "You weren't supposed to find him yet." Laura raised her weapon toward the ceiling speakers. "Show yourself." A distorted laugh echoed through the room. "You're too late anyway." Daniel began sobbing uncontrollably. "It watches, it records, it never stops." The surgical lights above them slowly lowered toward the chair, casting long shadows across the walls. Laura noticed something carved into the tiled floor beneath Daniel's chair. A circle of numbers, arranged like a clock, all pointing to one time. 9:17. The exact moment Daniel had disappeared. The intercom voice spoke again, softer this time. He was the 7 to 1st. Laura's blood ran cold. 7 to 1st what? Observation. Suddenly, every monitor in the room flickered on simultaneously, displaying dozens of live video feeds. Not just Daniel's house, but homes across Pine Hollow. Bedrooms, living rooms, hallways, families going about their nightly routines, completely unaware they were being watched. Laura stared in horror. "How many people have you been recording?" The voice answered calmly. "All of them." Trent finally snapped the last restraint loose. Daniel collapsed forward, gasping as circulation returned to his arms. "We need to go," Trent said urgently. Laura nodded and grabbed Daniel's shoulder, helping him stand. But as they turned toward the doors, the surgical lights overhead began spinning slowly, casting dizzying patterns across the room. The intercom emitted a loud, piercing feedback squeal that forced them to cover their ears. Then the floor beneath the chair shifted. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a dark shaft descending into the building's foundation. From deep inside the shaft, a faint red light glowed, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Daniel stared into the darkness, trembling violently. "That's where they take them," he whispered. Laura felt a surge of dread tighten her chest. "Who takes them?" she asked. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he spoke 3 words that made Laura's pulse stop. Not who, what. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the operating room. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. The intercom crackled one final time. "Now it knows you're here." The footsteps stopped directly outside the locked doors. The handle began to turn. The surgical doors rattled violently as the handle twisted from the outside. Metal groaned against reinforced locks, each movement echoing through the operating room like a countdown. Laura tightened her grip on her weapon, positioning herself between Daniel and the doors. Trent scanned the room frantically, searching for another exit. "Tell me there's another way out," Trent said. Daniel shook uncontrollably, pointing toward the open shaft beneath the chair. "That leads down, but they always bring people back from there." "That's not reassuring," Trent muttered. The door handle twisted harder. The metal lock bolts trembled as if something immensely strong was testing their resistance. Laura turned back to Daniel. "Listen carefully. We're getting you out of here. But I need you focused. Who took you?" Daniel's lips trembled. "I never saw their face. Only reflections. Always reflections." Before Laura could ask more, the surgical room lights flickered violently, plunging the room into momentary darkness. When they returned, every monitor screen displayed a single image. A hallway camera feed. It showed a man standing outside the operating room doors. He wore a white hospital coat, spotless despite the decay surrounding him. His posture was calm, almost patient. But his face remained obscured by shadow, distorted by the camera's grainy feed. The intercom crackled again. "You've interrupted years of observation." Laura stepped closer to the monitor. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly, as though studying her through the camera. "I am the caretaker of truth," the voice replied calmly. Trent scoffed. "You're a kidnapper and a psychopath." The man's shoulders shifted slightly, as if amused. "Truth requires sacrifice." The doors rattled again, harder this time. A loud metallic crack split through the room as one of the locking bolts bent inward. "We don't have time for this," Laura said sharply. "Daniel, move." Trent helped Daniel toward the open shaft while Laura backed toward them, weapons still aimed at the doors. The shaft ladder descended into darkness, illuminated faintly by the eerie red glow Daniel had noticed earlier. The air rising from below smelled damp and metallic. "Go," Laura ordered Trent. Trent helped Daniel climb down first. The injured man moved slowly, shaking from exhaustion and fear. Trent followed, turning to Laura. "Hurry!" The door burst open behind her. Metal hinges screamed as the reinforced frame bent outward. Laura spun around, weapon raised. The man from the monitor stepped inside. He was taller than she expected, thin, pale, with silver-gray hair combed neatly back. His hospital coat looked freshly pressed, untouched by dust or decay. But it was his eyes that froze her. Cold, emotionless, and strangely reflective, catching the surgical lights in a way that made them seem almost mirrored. "You've compromised the experiment," he said calmly. Laura didn't lower her weapon. "Step back." He ignored her command, taking one slow step forward. "You don't understand what you've interrupted," he continued. "Observation reveals humanity's truest nature." Laura fired a warning shot into the floor between them. The man didn't flinch. "You believe violence ends fear," he said softly. "It only reveals it." Behind her, Trent shouted, "Laura, now!" She backed toward the shaft ladder, never breaking eye contact with the man. "Who are you?" she demanded. He smiled faintly. "Dr. Elias Voss." The name struck Laura instantly. She had seen it earlier in Daniel's research files. St. Augustine's former head psychiatric surgeon, officially declared dead in a hospital fire nearly 2 decades earlier. "You're supposed to be dead," she said. Voss tilted his head. "Observation requires isolation. Death is very isolating." Laura fired another warning shot, this time closer to his feet. "Stay back." Instead of advancing, Voss simply watched her, his reflective eyes absorbing every movement. "You're afraid," he said. Laura climbed onto the ladder, descending slowly. "Everyone feels fear." Voss nodded slightly. "But most never understand it." As Laura dropped into the shaft and pulled the ladder hatch closed above her, she heard Voss's voice echo down the metal tunnel. "I look forward to observing yours." The shaft descended nearly 2 stories before opening into a narrow underground corridor. The red glow came from dim emergency lights mounted along damp concrete walls. Trent supported Daniel, who could barely stand. "This way," Daniel whispered weakly. "They moved people through here. I heard them, crying, screaming sometimes." Laura scanned the corridor, weapon ready. The air was thick with humidity, and water dripped steadily from pipes overhead, creating a rhythmic echo. "How long were you here?" she asked Daniel. He swallowed hard. "I don't know. They kept me sedated. but I woke up sometimes. He talked to me through speakers, asked questions, watched everything. What kind of questions? Trent asked. Daniel's voice cracked. About fear. About guilt. About memories. He made me relive things. Personal things. Laura felt anger rising beneath her professional composure. Why you? She asked. Daniel hesitated. I found his old research files, he admitted. I was writing an article about hospital scandals. I thought he died in the fire, but there were financial records, recent ones. Someone had been funding secret renovations here for years. Trent exhaled sharply. So he took you to silence you. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, he said I was perfect. Said journalists understand observation better than anyone. They continued moving down the corridor until it opened into a large underground chamber. Laura's flashlight swept across the room, and her breath caught. Rows of metal cages lined the walls. Most were empty, but several still contained personal belongings. Shoes, clothing, torn photographs. A child's stuffed bear sat in one cage corner, its fur stained dark brown. Trent cursed under his breath. How many people has he taken? Laura approached one cage and examined a rusted plaque mounted beside it. Each cage had a number. The highest one she saw read 71. Daniel whispered, "That was me." Laura scanned the chamber further. Along one wall stood a massive control panel filled with surveillance monitors. Many were dark, but several still flickered with live feeds from homes throughout Pine Hollow. This isn't just kidnapping, Trent said. It's long-term surveillance, data collection. Laura nodded grimly. He's been studying people, watching their daily lives, waiting until they are psychologically vulnerable, then taking them. Daniel suddenly pointed toward a narrow passage at the far end of the chamber. There's another exit, he said. Delivery trucks used it. That's how supplies came in. Before they could move, the monitors behind them flickered simultaneously. Voss's face appeared across every screen. His calm expression hadn't changed. You continue to interfere, he said softly. Laura stepped toward the monitors. It's over, Voss. We know what you've done. He smiled faintly. You know nothing yet. The screens shifted, displaying dozens of missing persons photographs. Men, women, children, some dating back nearly 15 years. Trent's face paled. That's impossible. Observation is timeless, Voss said. Fear evolves. I document it. Daniel collapsed to his knees, staring at the images. You killed them. Voss tilted his head. No, he replied calmly. Most of them killed themselves. I simply removed their distractions. Laura's jaw clenched. You tortured them. I liberated them, Voss corrected. Suddenly, a loud mechanical rumble echoed through the underground chamber. The corridor behind them began sealing as thick metal shutters slid down from the ceiling. Trent grabbed Daniel and pulled him toward the narrow passage. He's trapping us again. Laura fired at one of the shutters, but the bullet ricocheted harmlessly. Move, she shouted. They sprinted through the passage as alarms began blaring throughout the underground complex. Red emergency lights pulsed rapidly, turning the concrete walls into flashing veins of crimson. Behind them, Voss's voice echoed through hidden speakers. Every subject believes escape equals safety. They reached a heavy steel door at the end of the passage. Trent slammed his shoulder into it once, twice, until it burst open. Cold night air flooded inside. They stumbled out into a snow-covered loading yard behind the hospital. Their breath formed frantic clouds in the freezing darkness. Trent collapsed beside Daniel, catching his breath. We need backup, now. Laura reached for her radio. Static answered. She tried her phone. No signal. They are jamming communications, she said. Daniel stared back toward the hospital building, terror still etched across his face. He won't stop, he whispered. He's been doing this for years. He won't stop now. Laura followed his gaze toward the towering silhouette of St. Augustine Medical Center. Several windows on the upper floors flickered faintly with light, like eyes watching from the darkness. She felt a chill crawl through her chest, because deep inside, she knew Daniel was right. Dr. Elias Voss wasn't just running an operation. He was conducting something far worse, and they had just become his newest subjects. Snow crunched beneath Detective Laura Kessler's boots as she led Trent and Daniel across the abandoned loading yard behind St. Augustine Medical Center. The freezing night air bit through their jackets, but none of them slowed down. Behind them, the hospital loomed like a silent predator, its shattered windows reflecting pale moonlight. Daniel stumbled, nearly collapsing into Trent's arms. "We need to get him somewhere safe," Trent said. Laura nodded, scanning the empty parking lot. Their car sat half-buried under snow near the tree line. Relief flickered across her face. Almost there. They reached the vehicle, and Trent eased Daniel into the back seat while Laura jumped into the driver's side. She turned the ignition. The engine hesitated, coughing weakly before finally roaring to life. The moment the heater clicked on, Daniel began shaking violently, not from cold, but shock finally settling into his bones. Laura pulled out of the lot quickly, headlights slicing through the snow-covered road leading away from the hospital. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, Daniel whispered from the back seat, "He won't let me go." Laura glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "You're safe now." Daniel shook his head weakly. "You don't understand. He records everything. Every fear. Every memory. He studies it, stores it, uses it." Trent turned slightly in his seat. "Uses it how?" Daniel swallowed. "He recreates it, in other victims." Laura's grip tightened on the steering wheel. They arrived at Pine Hollow Police Department just before midnight. Emergency lights from patrol vehicles flashed across the snow as officers rushed out to meet them. Paramedics immediately loaded Daniel onto a stretcher, wrapping him in thermal blankets while checking his vitals. He clutched Laura's sleeve before they wheeled him inside. "His office," Daniel whispered. "Basement archives, hidden elevator behind old psychiatric wing. He keeps original research there." Laura nodded firmly. "We'll find it." As paramedics pushed Daniel through the hospital doors, Laura felt the weight of his words pressing heavily against her chest. Trent approached quietly. "You believe him?" Laura didn't hesitate. Every word. Inside the station, Captain Morris stood waiting in the briefing room, arms crossed tightly across his chest. His face darkened as Laura and Trent entered. "You disobeyed direct orders," Morris snapped. "You went into a condemned building without backup." Laura tossed a blood-stained evidence bag onto the table, the leather journal they'd recovered earlier. "And we found the man responsible for 15 years of disappearances," she replied coldly. The room fell silent. Trent placed a portable drive onto the table next. Surveillance feeds. Hundreds of live recordings from homes across Pine Hollow. Morris stared at the drive, his anger slowly dissolving into disbelief. "You're saying someone's been spying on half this town?" "Not spying," Laura said quietly. "Studying." Morris exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. "All right, we do this by the book. Full tactical entry tomorrow morning. Warrants. State investigators. Everything." Laura shook her head. "He'll destroy the evidence before sunrise. He's already locking sections of the building down." Morris glared at her. "You're not storming that place again tonight." Laura held his gaze. "Then we need another way in." 2 hours later, Laura stood outside Pine Hollow Public Records office, snow drifting softly beneath flickering streetlights. Trent stepped beside her, holding 2 cups of stale vending machine coffee. "You think we'll find something here?" he asked. Laura nodded. "Hospitals bury secrets and paperwork long before they bury them in basements." They entered the nearly empty records building, flashing their badges to the sleepy night clerk before heading toward archived municipal construction files. The basement records room smelled like mildew and forgotten history. Rows of filing cabinets stretched endlessly beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Laura began scanning through building permits for St. Augustine Medical Center dating back 30 years. Most entries detailed standard maintenance work. Then she found it. A sealed construction request filed just 3 months before the hospital fire that supposedly killed Dr. Elias Voss. The document described renovations to underground psychiatric research facilities, expansion of containment rooms, installation of biometric monitoring systems, and structural reinforcement of basement tunnels. Trent leaned closer. "That was never reported publicly." Laura nodded grimly. "Because the fire shut everything down, officially." She flipped to the final page of the file. Her breath caught. The renovation was funded by a private foundation. The Halbrecht Institute for Behavioral Observation. Trent frowned. Never heard of them. Laura quickly searched the database. The institute had no listed address, no registered board members, only a financial trail leading to offshore accounts. Ghost organization, Trent said. Or a sponsor who wanted to stay invisible, Laura replied. As she gathered the documents, something slipped loose from the folder, an old photograph paper clipped to the back. It showed Dr. Elias Voss standing beside 3 other individuals inside a hospital laboratory. All wore identical white coats. Their faces were younger, but their expressions carried the same eerie calm. Laura stared at the photo longer than she wanted to. Voss wasn't working alone, she whispered. Back at the station, digital forensic teams were already analyzing the surveillance footage Trent had recovered. Dozens of monitors displayed still images of victims taken from inside their own homes. Families eating dinner, children sleeping, couples arguing quietly in kitchens. Laura felt sick watching it. How many years does this go back? She asked one technician. Earliest timestamp we've found so far is 13 years, he replied. But storage capacity suggests much older archives exist somewhere else. Laura turned toward Trent. Daniel said Voss kept original research files hidden in the basement. Trent nodded. Hidden elevator. Before they could continue, Laura's phone buzzed. A nurse from Pine Hollow General Hospital spoke urgently through the receiver. Detective Kessler, your witness is asking for you. He says it's important. Daniel Harrow sat upright in his hospital bed when Laura and Trent entered his room. His skin still looked pale, but his eyes were sharper now, alert and terrified all at once. He contacted me, Daniel said immediately. Laura stiffened. How? Daniel pointed to the television mounted on the wall. It turned on by itself. Static at first, then his voice. Trent stepped toward the TV, examining the cables. Hospital channels are internal. He shouldn't be able to. He can access anything connected to electricity, Daniel interrupted shakily. He told me something before the screen went black. Laura leaned closer. What did he say? Daniel swallowed hard. He said I was only phase 1. Silence filled the room. Laura felt dread spread through her chest. What does that mean? Daniel's voice cracked. He said phase 2 begins tonight. Before Laura could respond, every light in the hospital room flickered simultaneously. The television screen burst to life with static. Slowly, the static formed into Voss's pale, emotionless face. Good evening, Detective Kessler, he said calmly. Trent lunged toward the TV, but the screen remained locked on Voss's expression. You've made remarkable progress, Voss continued. You've even discovered the Institute's existence. Laura stepped closer to the screen. Where are the others, Voss? He smiled faintly, still observing. Daniel trembled violently beside her. Please, just stop. Voss's eyes shifted slightly toward Daniel, though he clearly couldn't see him directly. Fear is the purest human reaction, Voss said softly. You helped me document it beautifully. Laura's voice hardened. We're coming for you. Voss tilted his head. You misunderstand, Detective. You already came for me. The screen flickered rapidly. Images replaced Voss's face, live surveillance footage from Pine Hollow streets, homes, and public buildings. One image made Laura's heart stop. It showed Pine Hollow Police Department itself. The camera angle revealed officers moving inside the evidence room, completely unaware they were being recorded. Trent cursed under his breath. He's inside our systems. The footage switched again, this time showing the hospital hallway outside Daniel's room. Empty. Then, slowly, a tall shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor. Laura's blood turned ice cold. That's not Liv, Trent said quickly. It can't be. Voss's voice returned. Observation never ends. The television screen went black. Alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. Laura ran toward the door and threw it open. Nurses and patients flooded the hallway in panic as overhead lights flickered wildly. Security staff shouted instructions while emergency generators struggled to maintain power. Trent grabbed Laura's arm. If he can control hospital systems, Daniel's not safe here. Laura nodded instantly. We move him to protective custody. Behind them, Daniel whispered in terror. He's escalating. This is how it started with the others. Laura turned toward him. What started? Daniel's eyes filled with dread. He stops watching and starts hunting. The hospital alarms wailed through Pine Hollow General like a wounded animal, echoing through hallways filled with panicked patients and rushing medical staff. Red emergency lights pulsed across the walls, turning the sterile corridors into something sinister and surreal. Detective Laura Kessler pushed Daniel Harrow's wheelchair as fast as she could while Trent cleared a path ahead of them. Two uniformed officers flanked them, hands hovering near their weapons. "Backup units are 5 minutes out," one officer shouted over the chaos. Laura shook her head. "We don't have 5 minutes." Daniel's breathing had become shallow and frantic. His eyes darted toward every flickering light, every darkened hallway. "He's already inside," Daniel whispered. Trent leaned down toward him. "You don't know that." Daniel grabbed Trent's sleeve with surprising strength. "I do. He always shuts power down first. It isolates people, makes them easier to control." Laura pushed harder, turning down a service corridor that led toward the hospital's underground ambulance bay, an exit far less crowded than the main emergency entrance. Halfway down the corridor, every overhead light suddenly died. Complete darkness swallowed them. Only the dim emergency floor lights remained, casting long, warped shadows along the walls. Then the intercom crackled to life. "Phase 2 has commenced." Voss's voice drifted calmly through the darkness. Laura froze for half a second before barking, "Keep moving." Trent pulled out his flashlight, scanning the hallway ahead. The beam illuminated scattered medical cats and overturned supply trays that hadn't been there seconds earlier. "It's like someone's barricading the corridor," Trent said. Laura's instinct screamed danger. "Faster!" Behind them, metal doors slammed shut one by one, sealing off escape routes with heavy hydraulic clicks. Daniel began sobbing quietly. "He's hurting us. He does that, moves people where he wants them." Laura's jaw tightened. "Not tonight." They reached the ambulance bay doors just as a loud crash echoed from behind them. Laura turned her flashlight toward the sound, and saw a hospital gurney rolling toward them on its own, pushed by unseen force down the slight incline of the corridor. It slammed into the wall beside them, metal rattling violently. Trent swore, "This place is turning into a trap." Laura shoved the ambulance bay doors open. Cold night air rushed in as snow blew across the concrete loading area. Several police vehicles had already arrived, lights flashing across the storm-dark sky. "Move!" Laura shouted. Officers rushed forward to assist, loading Daniel into the back of an armored transport van normally reserved for high-risk detainees. Laura climbed inside beside him while Trent slammed the rear doors shut. "Where are we taking him?" Trent asked, jumping into the passenger seat. Laura answered immediately. "County Protective Facility. Reinforced building. Independent power grid." The driver nodded and accelerated through the snow-covered streets. The van's interior hummed with the low vibration of its armored engine. Daniel sat strapped into a medical restraint chair, wrapped in blankets but still visibly shaking. "He's never lost control before," Daniel whispered. Laura sat across from him, studying his face carefully. "Tell me exactly what Phase 2 means." Daniel swallowed, gathering strength. "Phase 1 is observation," he said. "Watching subjects, recording behavior patterns, identifying emotional triggers." "And Phase 2? Trent asked from the front. Daniel's eyes filled with dread. "Direct exposure." Laura felt a chill crawl through her spine. "Explain." "He recreates personal fears, confronts victims with them physically, forces them to react while monitoring psychological collapse." Trent glanced back in disbelief. "You're saying he terrorizes people as some kind of experiment?" Daniel nodded weakly. "He believes fear strips away human deception, reveals the true self." Laura clenched her fists. "He's torturing people for data." Daniel whispered, "Yes." They reached the County Protective Facility 20 minutes later. The building stood heavily fortified, surrounded by tall fencing and armed security patrols. Its concrete walls were built to withstand riots, storms, and organized attacks. Daniel was escorted inside under heavy guard. Laura and Trent followed closely behind, finally allowing themselves a moment to breathe once the reinforced doors sealed shut behind them. "He can't get in here," Trent said, though his voice lacked full confidence. Laura wasn't so sure. Inside the facility's secure conference room, Captain Morris joined them via video call. His face looked pale beneath the fluorescent office lighting. "I've got state authorities mobilizing," he said. "National investigators are being notified. This is way bigger than we thought." Laura nodded. "We need full tactical entry into St. Augustine before Voss wipes everything." Morris hesitated. "You'll get it, but we've got another problem." He tapped his keyboard, projecting a digital map of Pine Hollow onto the conference screen. Dozens of blinking red dots appeared across residential neighborhoods. "These locations were pulled from your surveillance data drive," Morris said. "Each red dot marks a home Voss has been monitoring heavily within the past 48 hours. Trent stared at the map. "That's at least 30 houses." Laura's stomach dropped. "Potential new victims." Morris nodded grimly. "We've already dispatched patrols to warn residents, but..." Suddenly, the video feed flickered violently. Static distorted Morris's image before his voice cut out completely. The conference room lights dimmed. Every screen in the facility flashed white simultaneously. Then Dr. Elias Voss's face appeared across all monitors. "How predictable," he said calmly. Laura jumped to her feet. "How are you inside this system?" Voss ignored her question. "You moved your subject to fortified containment." A logical but emotionally driven decision. Trent slammed his fist onto the table. "You're done, Voss. Federal agents are already moving in." Voss smiled faintly. "Federal agents fear failure more than truth. They will hesitate. You will not." Laura stepped closer to the screen. "Why show yourself now?" "Because Phase 2 requires witnesses," Voss replied. The screens changed, displaying live footage from one of the red dot houses on the map. A family sat in their living room watching television, unaware they were being observed. Laura's heart pounded. "What are you doing?" Voss's voice softened almost gently. "Demonstrating." The living room lights in the footage suddenly went dark. The family stood, confused, calling out to one another. The father reached for his phone, but the screen remained black. Then, slowly, a shadow appeared at the far end of their hallway. Laura felt her breath catch in her throat. "You stop this right now," she shouted. Voss tilted his head slightly. "You are welcome to try." The screen split into multiple feeds, showing similar blackouts occurring in several homes across Pine Hollow simultaneously. Trent stared in horror. His launching coordinated abductions. Daniel collapsed into his chair, sobbing. "This is how it started last time." Laura grabbed her radio. "Dispatch every available unit to those addresses, now." Behind her, Voss spoke one final time. "You wanted access to my research, detective." Laura glared at the screen. "You're about to experience it firsthand." The monitors shut off instantly. Emergency sirens began echoing outside the protective facility as police vehicles raced through the snow-covered streets toward the blinking red dot homes. Laura grabbed her coat and weapon. "We're moving," she said. Trent nodded, adrenaline already sharpening his focus. "Which address first?" Laura stared at the map, watching one red dot blink faster than the others. "That one," she said. Daniel's trembling voice followed them toward the door. "You can't stop him all at once." Laura paused only long enough to answer. "Then we stop him piece by piece." As she and Trent ran toward their vehicle, snow began falling heavier across Pine Hollow, swallowing the town in white silence while somewhere in the darkness, Dr. Elias Voss prepared his next experiment. And this time, the entire town had become his laboratory. Snow hammered against the windshield as Detective Laura Kessler's cruiser tore through Pine Hollow's narrow residential streets. Sirens screamed into the night, their echoes swallowed by the storm thickening around them. Behind her, Trent studied the tablet displaying the blinking red dot locations. "They're spreading," he said. 3 new signals just appeared. Laura's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Is accelerating." Dispatch crackled through her radio. "Unit 12, we've got officers reporting power failures across the northern district. Multiple 911 calls, possible home invasions." "Copy," Laura responded sharply. "Redirect those units to the addresses we transmitted. No solo entries. Wait for backup." Trent glanced toward her. "You think he's physically moving between houses?" Laura shook her head. "No, he's controlling infrastructure. Power grids. Security systems. He's forcing people into panic and isolating them until he can strike." The cruiser skidded slightly as Laura turned onto Willow Bend Road, tires grinding through heavy snow. Ahead, flashing patrol lights illuminated a two-story colonial house, one of the red dot locations. They arrived just as two officers kicked open the front door. Laura jumped out, drawing her weapon. "Police! Anyone inside?" The officers waved them forward. "Family's inside, but something's wrong." Laura stepped into the house carefully. The living room was in chaos, furniture overturned, shattered glass scattered across the floor. A mother and father clutched two young children on the couch, all trembling violently. "He was here," the father stammered. Laura crouched beside them. "Who?" The man's face was pale, eyes wide with shock. "I don't know, we never saw him clearly. The lights went out, then every door in the house locked at once." The mother spoke through tears. Voices came through the baby monitor, describing things we were afraid of, things no one should know. Trent scanned the room. "Any injuries?" The father shook his head. "No, he just watched." Laura's stomach twisted. "His escalating psychological exposure," she muttered. Before she could ask another question, Laura noticed something carved into the hardwood floor near the staircase. A small number. 72. She felt ice crawl through her chest. "Trent," she said quietly, pointing. He knelt beside the marking, his face tightening. "His numbering them." Laura stood slowly. "And Daniel was 71. They rushed back outside as dispatch shouted through the radio again. "Unit 12, second location reporting missing occupant. Repeat, possible abduction in progress." Laura jumped into the cruiser, tires spinning as she accelerated toward the next address. Snow reduced visibility to barely 20 feet, but she didn't slow down. "Location," she demanded. "Corner of Maple and Hargrove." Trent's voice tightened. "That's less than a mile." They reached the house within minutes. Front door wide open. Porch light flickering wildly. A teenage boy stood outside barefoot in the snow, screaming hysterically. "They took my sister," he cried. Laura rushed toward him. "Who took her?" "I don't know," he sobbed. "The power went out, then all the phones died. I heard her screaming upstairs, but the bedroom door wouldn't open." Laura and Trent exchanged a glance before sprinting inside. The upstairs hallway reeked of burned wiring and damp insulation. The girl's bedroom door hung crookedly from its hinges, splintered outward like something had forced its way inside. The room itself was empty. Only a shattered mirror lay across the floor. Laura stepped closer, her flashlight catching something scratched into the mirror's surface. 73. Trent exhaled sharply. He's counting victims like data points. Laura clenched her jaw. "And is getting faster." By midnight, Pine Hollow had become a war zone of flashing police lights and panicked emergency calls. Officers moved door-to-door warning residents while technicians scrambled to restore failing power grids. Inside the mobile command center parked near Town Hall, Laura studied the digital map with growing dread. 6 red dots had gone dark completely, indicating confirmed disappearances. "We're losing them," Trent said quietly. Laura didn't respond. Instead, she zoomed the map outward, studying the pattern of abductions. They formed a circle. And at the center of that circle sat St. Augustine Medical Center. "He's drawing them back to the hospital," she whispered. Trent leaned closer. "Why?" Laura stared at the pattern. "Because he wants everything centralized for Phase 2, maybe Phase 3. Before Trent could respond, a technician shouted from across the van. "Detective, we just intercepted a broadcast signal." Laura rushed over. The screen displayed static before slowly forming into Dr. Elias Voss's face once again. "Good evening, Pine Hollow," he said calmly. The feed appeared to be hijacking local emergency broadcast systems. Across town, televisions and phones flickered as his voice replaced weather alerts and news channels. "You are experiencing the second phase of behavioral revelation," Voss continued. "Your reactions will be documented with care and precision." Laura grabbed a microphone linked to the command system. "Voss, this ends tonight." He smiled faintly. "You are beginning to understand urgency, detective." The screen shifted, displaying a dimly lit corridor inside St. Augustine. Several figures sat restrained in chairs beneath surgical lights. Laura's breath caught. 6 people, including the teenage girl from Maple Street. Trent cursed. "He's showing them like trophies." Voss's voice softened. Subjects 7-2 through 7-7. Fear responses escalating beautifully. Laura leaned closer to the monitor. Let them go. They volunteered, Voss replied calmly. They were kidnapped. Trent shouted. Voss tilted his head slightly. Kidnapping implies resistance. They followed fear precisely where it led them. Laura's voice hardened. You're sick. No, Voss replied. I am observant. The feed zoomed closer to the restrained victims. Each wore biometric monitoring devices strapped to their chests, recording heart rate, respiration, neurological activity. Daniel's terrified voice suddenly echoed behind Laura. His preparing extended exposure. Laura turned. Daniel stood in the command van doorway, wrapped in a hospital blanket, eyes filled with panic. You weren't supposed to be here, Trent said. Daniel ignored him, staring at the screen. He's moving to Phase 3. Laura turned back to the monitor. What's Phase 3? Daniel whispered, finalization. Voss's smile widened slightly. Your witness is remarkably perceptive, he said through the broadcast. Laura's pulse pounded. What does Phase 3 mean, Voss? Voss leaned closer to the camera. It means observation becomes participation. Suddenly, the video feed shifted again, this time showing live footage of Pine Hollow's mobile command center itself. Laura felt her blood turn cold as she saw her own reflection on the screen. Trent swore under his breath. He's watching us right now. Voss spoke softly. You have become invaluable research subjects, detectives. The screen flickered violently before displaying a new location, an underground chamber beneath St. Augustine filled with surgical equipment and surveillance monitors. At the center stood a single reinforced chair. Empty. For you, Voss said calmly. The broadcast cut to black. Silence filled the command van. Daniel's voice trembled. He's not just studying fear anymore, he's trying to transfer it, record it, preserve it. Laura grabbed her coat and weapon, adrenaline surging through her veins. Then we end this tonight. Trent nodded. Full tactical assault. Laura stared toward the silhouette of St. Augustine visible through the snowstorm. No, she said quietly. We go in first. Trent blinked. That's insane. Laura's voice hardened with cold certainty. He wants us inside. He's expecting it, which means he'll have every trap ready for a large force. Daniel stepped forward weakly. I know another entrance, one he showed me when he thought I was too sedated to remember. Laura met Trent's gaze. It was dangerous. It was reckless, and it was their only chance to save the victims before Phase 3 began. Laura nodded once. Show us. As snow buried Pine Hollow beneath a suffocating white silence, three figures prepared to walk directly into the heart of Dr. Elias Voss's nightmare. And this time, they weren't just hunting him. They were walking into his final experiment. The rain returned to Blackridge the night Detective Mara Ellison finally decided to break a rule she had followed her entire career. She stopped asking for permission. The drive to Deputy Harris Klein's abandoned lake cabin took nearly 40 minutes. The narrow forest road twisted through pine trees that clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. Mara's headlights cut through thick mist rolling off Blackridge Lake, turning the world into a ghostly tunnel of silver fog and dark shadows. Beside her, Officer Daniel Ruiz sat stiffly, clutching the manila folder containing copies of the newly recovered case files, the ones found hidden inside Dr. Leonard Bell's office vent. Internal Affairs is going to crucify us if they find out we came here without a warrant, Ruiz said quietly. Mara kept her eyes on the road. If we wait for a warrant, the cabin will burn down or be cleaned out. You really think Klein kept something here? I think men like Klein never destroy evidence, Mara replied. They keep it close, like trophies. The car rolled to a stop near a rusted metal gate that hung crooked from a wooden fence. Beyond it, the cabin crouched at the lake's edge, dark, silent, and watching. It looked abandoned. But Mara had learned appearances in Blackridge were rarely honest. They stepped out into damp air heavy with the smell of wet pine and lake water. The wind carried faint ripples across the black surface of the lake, making it shimmer like oil under moonlight. Ruiz shivered. This place feels wrong. Good, Mara said, pulling a flashlight from her coat. That means we're close to the truth. The cabin door was unlocked. That alone made Ruiz uneasy. Wouldn't he lock it if he had something to hide? Ruiz whispered. Depends, Mara said, pushing the door open slowly. Sometimes leaving doors unlocked is meant to make people think there's nothing inside worth stealing. The hinges groaned as the door swung inward. Dust floated in the beam of Mara's flashlight. The interior smelled of mildew and stale smoke. Furniture sat covered with white sheets. Empty beer bottles lined the fireplace mantel, their labels faded and peeling. Ruiz moved cautiously behind her, hand resting on his holstered weapon. They searched room by room. Kitchen. Empty. Living room. Dust-covered and silent. 2 small bedrooms. Bare mattresses and moth-eaten blankets. Nothing. Ruiz exhaled. Maybe we're chasing ghosts. Mara paused near the hallway closet. Something tugged at her instincts. A faint scrape pattern on the wooden floor, like something heavy had been dragged repeatedly. She crouched, brushing dust aside. Beneath it, faint scratch marks formed parallel lines leading toward the closet door. "Help me with this," she said. Ruiz grabbed the closet handle and pulled. Inside hung several old jackets and fishing gear. Nothing unusual. But Mara stepped forward and tapped the back wall. The sound echoed hollow. Ruiz frowned. "That's not drywall." Mara shoved the coats aside and ran her fingers along the wooden paneling. Near the bottom corner, she found a tiny recessed latch. She pressed it. The panel shifted inward with a soft click. Ruiz stared. "You've got to be kidding me." They pulled the panel open together, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Cold air drifted upward, carrying the metallic scent Mara knew too well. Blood. The basement smelled like secrets rotting in concrete. Mara descended first, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. Each step creaked beneath her boots. Ruiz followed closely, his breathing shallow and fast. At the bottom, the beam illuminated a long rectangular room lined with steel shelves. Boxes. Dozens of them, each labeled with faded masking tape. Dates. Names. Case numbers. Ruiz whispered, "Oh my God." Mara moved toward the nearest shelf and pulled down a box labeled 1987, read, L. Inside were yellowed photographs, police reports, autopsy summaries, and newspaper clippings about Laura Reed, Blackridge's first officially recorded missing child. Laura Reed's case had been ruled a runaway. Mara flipped through the documents quickly. Scribbled notes appeared in red ink along the margins, observations that didn't exist in official reports. Subject last seen near riverbank. Body weight inconsistent with river current theory. Potential burial site moved. Ruiz swallowed. "Those are investigative notes." "Not official ones," Mara said. "Personal." She opened another box. 1994, Santos, Miguel. Another missing person case. Also ruled accidental drowning. More red ink notes. More contradictions. Mara's pulse quickened as realization settled in. "This isn't just evidence," she said quietly. "It's a parallel investigation." "By Klein?" Ruiz asked. "Or by someone Klein worked for?" They spent nearly 20 minutes opening boxes. Each revealed the same disturbing pattern. Missing persons cases that had been prematurely closed, each containing hidden notes suggesting foul play. Then Mara noticed something else. Every box had a small black symbol drawn in the upper corner. A circle intersected by 3 vertical lines. She had seen it before. In the secret case files. In Dr. Bell's vent. And carved faintly into the inside of Caroline Hale's locket. Ruiz noticed her staring. "You recognize that symbol?" Mara nodded slowly. "It's their mark. The hollow circle." "I think so." A chill swept through the room. Near the back wall stood a heavy steel desk covered with dust and stacks of leather-bound notebooks. Mara wiped one clean and opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten entries, each dated and signed with initials, H.K. Harris Klein. Ruiz leaned over her shoulder as she read aloud. March 12, 1991. Subject delivered successfully. Bell confirmed compliance. Payment received through Hollow Circle intermediary. Ruiz stiffened. Delivered. Mara turned the page. September 2nd, 1994. Santos child relocated per instructions. Disposal handled by Bell. Her stomach twisted. They weren't covering up deaths. They were facilitating them. She flipped further. January 17th, 2001. Ellison investigation monitored. Containment strategy successful. Mara froze. Ruiz looked at her. Listen, that's your last name. Her hands trembled slightly as she scanned the entry. Target, Thomas Ellison. Suspicion level elevated after riverbank discovery. Directive issued. Neutralize and redirect case closure to accidental drowning. The room seemed to tilt. My father, she whispered. Ruiz stared at her, horrified. They killed him, she said, voice hollow. And then they buried the truth in paperwork. A sudden creak echoed upstairs. Both detectives snapped their heads toward the staircase. Ruiz drew his weapon. You hear that? Mara nodded, slowly closing the notebook. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Someone was inside the cabin. Mara extinguished her flashlight instantly, plunging the basement into darkness. They crouched behind the steel desk as the footsteps moved across the living room above them. Boards groaned. A chair scraped. Ruiz leaned close, whispering, What if it's Klein? He's been missing for weeks, Mara whispered back. If he's alive, he's hiding. The footsteps paused directly above the closet entrance. Silence stretched. Then, the closet door opened. Light spilled down the stairwell. A silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, blocking the beam from a flashlight. Detective Ellison, a calm voice called out. Mara's chest tightened. She knew that voice. Captain Elias Ward. Ruiz's eyes widened. Your captain. Mara pressed a finger to her lips. Ward descended the staircase slowly, his polished shoes echoing softly on the wooden steps. Come out, he said evenly. There's no reason to hide. Mara rose carefully from behind the desk, stepping into the dim light. Ruiz followed, weapon still raised. Ward reached the bottom and smiled faintly, as if he had expected them all along. I was hoping you'd find this place, he said. Mara's voice was ice. How long have you known about it? Ward glanced around the basement with casual familiarity, long enough to know it needed to stay buried. Ruiz stepped forward. You're under arrest, Captain. Ward raised a hand, and Ruiz froze as he noticed two additional figures appear at the top of the stairs, armed men in dark clothing, faces shadowed. You should put the gun down, officer, Ward said calmly. This doesn't have to end badly. Ruiz hesitated, glancing at Mara. She gave a tiny shake of her head. Ward sighed. Mara, your father was a good man. Truly. But he couldn't accept that some systems exist for necessary purposes. Necessary, she snapped. Children disappeared. Families were destroyed. Ward's expression remained serene. Order requires sacrifice, he said. The hollow circle ensures stability, financial, political, social. The town thrives because of balance. Balance. Mara's voice shook with fury. You murdered people to protect your power. Ward tilted his head slightly. We preserved Blackridge from becoming like every other dying town. Crime stays low. Wealth flows in quietly. Everyone benefits. Not the victims. Ward met her gaze steadily. History never remembers individual casualties. Only outcomes. The armed men began descending the stairs slowly. Ruiz tightened his grip on his weapon. Ward continued speaking calmly, almost kindly. You were never meant to discover this, Mara. But once you started opening old files, Bell recommended elimination. Mara's jaw clenched. Bell is dead. Yes, Ward said quietly. An unfortunate complication. You killed him. Ward smiled faintly. He became unreliable. The men were halfway down the staircase now. Mara's mind raced. There were 3 of them. 2 armed guards and Ward himself, who likely carried a weapon as well. Ruiz leaned closer and whispered, barely audible, Plan. Mara stared at Ward, then subtly tapped the leather notebook still in her hand. Evidence. Proof. Everything they needed to destroy the hollow circle. If they survived long enough to reveal it. Ward extended his hand calmly. Give me the notebook, Mara. We'll make this painless. She stared at him, then slowly closed the notebook and slipped it into her coat. No, she said. Ward sighed, disappointed. I was afraid you'd say that. He nodded once toward the guards. They raised their weapons. Ruiz lifted his gun simultaneously. The basement air thickened with tension, each breath sharp and heavy. Ward's voice dropped to a whisper. You should have let the past stay buried. Mara's finger tightened around her trigger. My father didn't, she said. A gunshot exploded in the confined space, and everything descended into chaos. Mara dove behind the steel desk as bullets tore through shelves, sending boxes crashing to the floor. Ruiz fired back, forcing one of the guards to stumble halfway down the stairs. Paper scattered everywhere, decades of secrets flying like wounded birds through the basement. Ward disappeared behind the staircase railing, shouting commands. Ruiz fired again, hitting a light fixture. Sparks burst, plunging the room into flickering darkness. Mara crawled across the floor, clutching the notebook tightly. If she lost it, everything ended. Another gunshot rang out, followed by Ruiz's grunt of pain. "Ruiz," she shouted. "I'm hit, but I'm okay," he gasped from somewhere behind an overturned shelf. Ward's voice echoed sharply. "Alive or dead, take the book." Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Mara rose, firing blindly toward the staircase as she sprinted toward the basement's far wall, searching desperately for another exit. Her flashlight beam flickered across the concrete, and caught the outline of a metal door hidden behind stacked crates. Hope surged through her veins. She kicked the crates aside and grabbed the handle. Locked. Behind her, boots pounded closer. Ruiz shouted, firing again. Mara slammed her shoulder into the door once. Twice. The lock groaned but held. A shadow lunged toward her. She turned and fired. The guard collapsed just feet away. Ward's furious shout echoed behind him. Mara slammed into the door one final time. The lock snapped. The door burst open, revealing a narrow tunnel leading into darkness beneath the lake shore. "Mara!" Ruiz yelled, stumbling toward her, blood soaking his sleeve. She grabbed his arm and pulled him into the tunnel. Behind them, Ward's voice roared with rage as they disappeared into the black passage. The door slammed shut. Gunfire echoed uselessly against steel. They ran blindly through the narrow tunnel, water dripping from the ceiling, the air growing colder with every step. Mara's lungs burned. Ruiz staggered beside her, bleeding but determined. Behind them, distant pounding echoed as Ward's men tried to break through the basement door. Mara tightened her grip on the notebook inside her coat. For the first time, she held undeniable proof. Proof of murder. Proof of corruption. Proof of the hollow circle. But she also knew one terrifying truth. They weren't just exposing a conspiracy. They were now running from an entire hidden empire. And the hollow circle would not stop until they were silenced forever. The tunnel smelled of rust, damp stone, and stagnant lake water. Every step echoed too loudly, bouncing off the narrow concrete walls as Mara and Ruiz pushed deeper into darkness. Ruiz stumbled again. Mara caught him before he collapsed. "Stay with me," she whispered urgently. "I'm good," he muttered through clenched teeth, though the blood soaking his sleeve told a different story. Mara stopped briefly, shining her flashlight across his arm. The bullet had grazed through the outer muscle, painful, messy, but not immediately fatal. "You're lucky," she said, tearing a strip from her undershirt and tying it tightly around the wound. "You still owe me paperwork after this." Ruiz forced a weak laugh. That might be the worst motivation speech I've ever heard. Behind them, faint metallic banging echoed through the tunnel. Ward's men were forcing their way in. "We don't have time," Mara said, helping Ruiz stand again. "Move." The tunnel sloped upward gradually, curving beneath the shoreline. Water pooled along the floor, soaking their boots with every step. The air grew fresher the farther they climbed, carrying the distant scent of pine trees and open night air. Finally, a faint silver glow appeared ahead. An exit! Mara quickened her pace, nearly dragging Ruiz with her. They burst through a rusted grate concealed behind a thick curtain of lake reeds and stumbled onto the muddy shoreline nearly 50 yards from the cabin. Cold wind slapped against them. Ruiz collapsed to one knee, gasping. Mara scanned the dark lake surface. The cabin lights flickered through trees behind them, partially hidden by fog. "We can't go back to town," Ruiz said hoarsely. "Ward will lock down the entire department." "I know," Mara replied, helping him stand again. "Which means we go somewhere he won't expect." She reached into her coat and touched the leather notebook. The weight of it felt heavier than steel. They reached Mara's car parked half a mile down the forest road. She drove without headlights for nearly 2 miles before finally turning them back on once they reached the main highway. Ruiz leaned his head against the window, pale but conscious. "Where are we going?" he asked. Mara hesitated. There was only one person left in Blackridge she might trust. And trusting anyone right now felt like gambling with her life. Evelyn Shaw, she said finally. Ruiz blinked. The retired archivist. She's been cataloging town records for 40 years. If the Hollow Circle existed for decades, she may know something, or at least know where to hide us. Ruiz nodded slowly. Better odds than staying alive in the police station. Evelyn Shaw's house sat on the far edge of Blackridge, perched on a hillside overlooking the river valley. It was an old Victorian home surrounded by towering oak trees and rusted iron fencing that groaned in the wind. Mara knocked twice. The porch light flicked on instantly. The door opened just a crack before Evelyn's sharp gray eyes peered out. "You look like death found you and changed its mind," the elderly woman said bluntly. "We need help," Mara replied. Evelyn studied her for a long moment, then opened the door fully. "Come inside before someone sees you." Evelyn worked with silent efficiency. Within minutes, Ruiz's wound was cleaned and bandaged properly. "You've been shot worse," Evelyn said dryly as she tied the gauze. "Stop grimacing." Ruiz winced anyway. Mara paced the living room, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Old bookshelves lined every wall, filled with town registries, historical maps, and decades of archived newspapers. Evelyn approached her slowly. "You found something," she said. Mara removed the leather notebook from her coat and handed it over. Evelyn opened it, and her face drained of color. "I hope this didn't still exist," she whispered. "So you know about them," Mara said. Evelyn closed the notebook carefully and looked at her with quiet dread. "Yes," she said. "I know about the Hollow Circle." Silence swallowed the room. Ruiz sat up straighter despite the pain. "You're telling me you knew about a secret organization kidnapping and murdering people for decades, and you said nothing?" he asked. Evelyn met his gaze calmly. "I said nothing because everyone who tried to speak disappeared," she replied. Mara leaned forward. "Who are they, Evelyn? We need names." Evelyn hesitated, walking toward a large oak cabinet near the fireplace. She unlocked it and pulled out an ancient rolled map tied with black ribbon. She spread it across the table. It was a detailed map of Blackridge and surrounding counties, but covered with handwritten markings, circles, lines, and symbols Mara instantly recognized. The Hollow Circle's symbol appeared repeatedly across key locations. Hospitals, government offices, real estate firms, shipping yards. "They're not just a local cult," Evelyn said quietly. "They're a network." Ruiz stared. "How big?" "Large enough to control the town council, influence state investigations, and erase entire families from public memory." Mara's chest tightened. "And Captain Ward?" Evelyn pointed to a symbol drawn over the Blackridge Police Department. "He's one of their high-ranking enforcers." Mara wasn't surprised anymore. But the next words nearly shattered her. "Your father discovered them 30 years ago," Evelyn said softly. Mara felt the air leave her lungs. Evelyn continued carefully. "Thomas Ellison came to me in secret. He found missing case files and strange financial transfers between town officials. He believed there was a group orchestrating it all." Mara's voice trembled. "Why didn't he expose them?" "He tried," Evelyn said. "But he underestimated how deep the circle ran. They discredited him, destroyed his evidence, and eventually, they killed him," Mara finished quietly. Evelyn nodded. "They staged his drowning to look like an accident. The same method they've used for decades." Ruiz cursed under his breath. Mara stared down at the map, her mind spinning. "How do we stop them?" she asked. Evelyn's expression hardened. "You don't stop the Hollow Circle by arresting one man," she said. "You destroy their foundation." "And how do we do that?" Evelyn tapped the center of the map. "The ledger." Mara frowned. "Another ledger." Evelyn nodded. "Klein's notebook is a field log, records of operations. But the real power lies in the master ledger. It contains financial records, member identities, political bribery trails, everything." Ruiz leaned forward. "Where is it?" Evelyn hesitated again. "Beneath Blackridge itself," she said. Mara exchanged a glance with Ruiz. "Be more specific," Mara said. Evelyn pointed to a location at the heart of town. The old municipal courthouse. "Below the courthouse is an abandoned Cold War fallout shelter," Evelyn explained. The Hollow Circle converted it into their central archive decades ago. Mara felt a surge of realization. That's why every major investigation in this town gets buried in legal red tape, she said. Exactly, Evelyn replied. They control the records and the history. Ruiz exhaled slowly. So all we have to do is break into the most secure building in Blackridge, while being hunted by corrupt police and a secret society. Correct, Evelyn said calmly. Ruiz groaned. Fantastic. Suddenly, headlights flashed through Evelyn's front windows. Mara froze. 3 black SUVs rolled slowly onto the property. Ward had found them. Back in trance, Evelyn said instantly, grabbing a shotgun from beneath her cabinet. Go. You're coming with us, Mara said. Evelyn shook her head. I'm 82 years old, detective. I move slower than conspiracy theories. I'll hold them here long enough for you to escape. Mara stepped forward. They'll kill you. Evelyn smiled faintly. They already tried once in 1978. I'm still here. Ruiz grabbed Mara's arm. We don't have time. Evelyn shoved the map into Mara's hands. End this, she said firmly. Mara hesitated, then nodded. They ran toward the back door as car doors slammed outside. Voices shouted commands. Mara and Ruiz slipped into the backyard just as Evelyn cocked the shotgun behind them. They sprinted into the tree line. Seconds later, gunfire exploded from the house. Mara didn't turn around. She couldn't. They ran until the sounds faded into the distance. Ruiz nearly collapsed again as they reached Mara's car parked along a gravel service road. She shoved him into the passenger seat and started the engine. Courthouse? Ruiz asked weakly. Mara gripped the steering wheel tightly. Yes. Blackridge Courthouse loomed ahead like a silent monument to secrets. Its tall stone columns glowed under streetlights, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. Mara parked behind the building near the records entrance. Ruiz checked his weapon, wincing as he moved his injured arm. You realize we're walking into their headquarters, he said. I know. They'll be waiting. Probably. Ruiz smirked faintly. Just checking. Mara unfolded Evelyn's map, locating the hidden access point marked beneath the building's rear archives room. They slipped inside through a maintenance door Ruiz forced open with his badge and a borrowed crowbar. The courthouse interior was silent, too silent. Mara's footsteps echoed softly across marble floors as they moved toward the basement archive corridor. Every shadow felt alive. Every hallway felt watched. They reached the archive room and began searching for the concealed shelter entrance described on the map. Behind a row of filing cabinets, Mara found a steel hatch embedded in the floor. She pried it open slowly. A metal ladder descended into darkness. Ruiz exhaled. Ladies first. Mara holstered her weapon, tightened her grip on the notebook, and climbed down. The fallout shelter was massive. Concrete corridors stretched outward like underground veins, lined with rusted emergency lights flickering weakly overhead. But unlike the abandoned shelters she expected, this one was active. Rows of modern filing systems filled the central chamber. Computer servers hummed quietly against one wall. Security cameras blinked red from ceiling corners. And at the far end stood a circular steel vault door engraved with the hollow circle symbol. Ruiz stared. That has to be it. Mara stepped forward cautiously, but before she could reach the vault, lights blazed on suddenly, flooding the chamber in harsh white brilliance. Slow applause echoed from behind them. Mara turned slowly. Captain Elias Ward stepped out from the shadows, flanked by 4 armed guards. His expression was calm, almost impressed. I underestimated you, he said. Ruiz raised his weapon instantly. Ward smiled faintly. You're too late, he continued. Mara's heart pounded. Ward gestured toward the vault. The ledger is inside, he said. And unfortunately, so are several members of the Hollow Circle's leadership. Mara's blood ran cold. Ward's smile widened slightly. They are very eager to meet the detective who refuses to stay buried. The guards raised their weapons. Ward stepped aside, revealing a group of shadowed figures emerging behind him. Powerful men and women whose faces Mara recognized from town leadership, business empires, and state government. The Hollow Circle had assembled, and Mara realized with terrifying clarity. This wasn't an ambush. It was a trial. The underground chamber pulsed with sterile white light as Mara and Ellison stood face to face with the leaders of the Hollow Circle. The air felt heavier than the concrete walls surrounding them, thick with decades of buried corruption and carefully hidden murder. Captain Elias Ward stood calmly at the center of the chamber, his posture relaxed, hands folded neatly behind his back like he was overseeing a routine department meeting instead of an execution. Around him, 5 figures stepped forward slowly from the shadows. Mara recognized each of them instantly. Mayor Harold Langston, Judge Marianne Crowley, Hospital Director Samuel Reeves, Shipping Magnate Douglas Ferrin, and State Senator Lionel Graves. The very people who shaped Blackridge's laws, economy, and justice system. Ruiz cursed under his breath beside her. We just walked into the entire power structure of this town. Ward's faint smile widened. Yes, he said calmly. You did. Mara refused to lower her weapon, though her pulse thundered in her ears. She could feel Ruiz shifting slightly beside her, adjusting his stance despite the injury that had already soaked his bandage crimson. Mayor Langston stepped forward, his polished shoes echoing softly against the concrete floor. Detective Ellison, he said pleasantly, as if greeting her at a charity gala. You've caused us considerable inconvenience. Mara's voice was steady, ice cold. You've murdered people for decades. Judge Crowley sighed softly. Such a harsh interpretation of historical necessity. Historical necessity, Ruiz snapped. Senator Graves stepped forward next, his expensive suit flawless even in the underground bunker. Blackridge thrives because we maintain order, he said calmly. Our investments, our partnerships, our industries, they rely on stability. The Hollow Circle ensures that instability is removed before it spreads. Mara's grip tightened around her weapon. You're talking about human beings. We're talking about sacrifice, Ferrin replied bluntly. Mara stepped forward slowly. My father uncovered you, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. You killed him to keep your secret. Hospital Director Reeves nodded almost respectfully. Thomas Ellison was persistent, he admitted. But he lacked perspective. He believed truth alone creates justice. And you believe murder creates progress. Mara demanded. Ward spoke again, his voice smooth and almost soothing. We believe survival requires difficult choices, detective. Ruiz laughed bitterly. That's what every monster says before history remembers them as monsters. Ward tilted his head slightly. History is written by those who survive, Officer Ruiz. Mara slowly reached into her coat. Every guard tensed instantly, raising their weapons higher. But she pulled out only the leather notebook and held it up for them to see. This is Klein's field ledger, she said. Every victim, every operation, every ritual. Ward's expression flickered for the first time. And Evelyn Shaw's map led us here, Mara continued. Judge Crowley's eyes darkened slightly. Evelyn was supposed to die decades ago, she muttered. Mara's voice hardened. She didn't. And neither will your secrets. Senator Graves smiled faintly. You assume you're leaving here alive. Mara met his gaze evenly. No, she said quietly. I assume none of us are. Ruiz glanced sideways at her, confused, but Mara subtly shifted her stance, nudging her coat open slightly. Inside, barely visible beneath the fabric, a small blinking transmitter glowed faint blue. Ruiz's eyes widened slightly as he realized. Back up! Ward noticed the movement. His eyes narrowed instantly. You came prepared, he said softly. Mara didn't respond. Instead, she slowly backed toward the vault door engraved with the Hollow Circle symbol. You built this empire on fear, she said, her voice echoing across the chamber. You erased families. You silenced investigations. You buried history itself. Mayor Langston scoffed. And yet Blackridge prospers. Prosperity built on graves always collapses, Mara replied. Ward raised his hand slightly. The guards stepped closer, tightening their formation around Mara and Ruiz. You've demonstrated admirable resilience, Ward said calmly. But this ends now. Suddenly, a distant explosion rattled the entire bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ward's calm expression cracked for the first time. Ruiz grinned despite the pain. Timing's perfect. Gunfire erupted faintly from somewhere above the courthouse structure. Police sirens wailed outside, growing louder by the second. Ward turned sharply toward Mara. You brought the state investigators. I brought the truth, she replied. Senator Graves snarled, drawing a concealed pistol. You stupid girl, you've destroyed decades of control. Before he could finish, the vault alarms blared violently as emergency lockdown protocols activated throughout the bunker. Red lights flooded the chamber. Automatic steel barriers began descending from the ceiling, isolating sections of the shelter. Chaos erupted. Ward grabbed Mara's arm violently, pulling her toward the vault door as guards engaged Ruiz in a firefight. Gunshots echoed deafeningly through the confined bunker corridors. You don't understand what you've done, Ward hissed, dragging her toward the vault keypad. If that ledger leaves this bunker, entire state economies collapse. Political alliances shatter. Violence spreads. Mara struggled against his grip. Maybe it should. Ward forced her against the vault, pressing his forearm against her throat. Your father said the same thing, he whispered. Mara's rage exploded. She slammed her elbow into his wounded side. She had memoized his weakness from Ruiz's earlier reports, and Ward staggered back with a pained gasp. She fired once. The bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him sideways into the vault control panel. Sparks exploded from damaged circuitry. The vault door groaned open halfway before jamming. Mara rushed forward and squeezed through the opening. Inside, rows of reinforced steel shelves filled the vault chamber, stacked with ledgers, hard drives, and decades of meticulously preserved records. The hollow circle's entire history. Ward staggered in behind her, blood staining his uniform. You think exposing this saves anyone? He snarled. It will destroy everything. Mara grabbed the master ledger from the central pedestal, thick, ancient, bound in black leather. Good, she said. Behind her, Ruiz burst into the vault doorway, clutching his bleeding arm but still standing. State police breached the building, he shouted. We've got maybe 2 minutes. Ward raised his weapon weakly, aiming at Mara one final time. Blackridge will burn, he rasped. Mara stepped forward slowly, staring directly into his eyes. Then maybe it deserves to be rebuilt. She fired once more. Ward collapsed beside the vault entrance, his weapon clattering across the floor. Silence followed. Moments later, armored state investigators flooded the bunker, arresting surviving guards and securing the vault contents. Leaders of the Hollow Circle were dragged from hiding chambers throughout the shelter, their power stripped away under flashing camera lights and shouted legal commands. Mara stood silently as officers catalogued the evidence she held in her hands. The ledger felt heavier than any weapon she had ever carried. Ruiz limped beside her, pale but smiling faintly. You just dismantled a secret society older than both of us, he said. Mara stared at the endless rows of confiscated records. No, she replied quietly. We exposed it. Dismantling it will take years. Weeks later, Blackridge stood under national investigation. Federal agents flooded the town. Arrests spread across government offices, financial institutions, and law enforcement agencies connected to the Hollow Circle. Mayor Langston, Senator Graves, Judge Crowley, Ferrin, Reeves, all charged. Public outrage consumed the town as families finally learned the truth behind decades of disappearances. Mara stood alone beside the river where her father's body had been found 30 years earlier. Snow melted slowly along the shoreline, revealing frozen grass beneath the thaw. Ruiz approached quietly behind her. I'm still in a sling. You okay? He asked. Mara watched the water move silently past. For the first time in my life. I think I am, she said. Ruiz nodded slowly. You know, he added, there's talk of offering you the captain's position once the department is rebuilt. Mara shook her head faintly. I'm not sure Blackridge needs another captain yet, she said. It needs truth first. Ruiz smiled. Your father would have been proud. Mara swallowed hard but didn't respond. That night, as investigators continued clearing the courthouse bunker, a junior federal agent opened one final sealed storage locker hidden deep within the shelter archives. Inside sat a small steel case marked with unfamiliar symbols. The agent opened it carefully. Inside rested a second ledger, older, darker, bound in cracked red leather. Its first page contained only 3 words written in faded ink. The Outer Circle. And beneath it, a list of towns, including several far beyond Blackridge. The agent stared in stunned silence as realization slowly spread across his face. The The hollow circle had never been alone. Miles away, Mara stood on her apartment balcony overlooking the quiet, recovering town. She held her father's badge in one hand, the night wind brushing against her face. For the first time, Blackridge felt honest, but somewhere deep inside her, an uneasy feeling stirred. Like something unfinished. Like shadows retreating only long enough to gather again. Mara closed her eyes briefly. And far below, unseen beneath courthouse floors and forgotten bunkers, the echoes of buried secrets waited patiently for the next truth brave enough to uncover them. Story 2. Raven Creek was the kind of town that prided itself on its quiet streets, maple-lined avenues, and the illusion that nothing ever went wrong. It had one main street, a single gas station, and a town hall that doubled as the local library. Its population of barely 5,000 was the kind that knew everyone by name, and more importantly, everyone's business. But beneath its serene surface, Raven Creek hid a darkness no one wanted to acknowledge. It began on a cold October morning when 17-year-old Ellie Parker failed to show up for school. Her mother, Claire Parker, called every friend Ellie had, drove by her usual hangouts, and finally filed a missing persons report. The local police, led by Chief Harold Benton, initially treated it as a teenage runaway case. But something about the details gnawed at Detective Mara Ellison, who had been brought in from the State Investigative Unit for another, unrelated case. Ellie's room showed no signs of struggle. Her backpack, wallet, and cell phone lay neatly on her bed. On the desk, a notebook was open, its last entry detailing her fascination with the old Raven Creek Asylum, which had been shut down decades earlier after a series of unexplained deaths. She wrote about hearing rumors that the grounds were still used at night, though the asylum had been abandoned for 30 years. Mara felt a chill as she read the notebook. There was an unsettling pattern she recognized immediately. The missing had often been the curious, the inquisitive, the ones who asked questions. Ellie's disappearance didn't feel random. It felt calculated. The investigation began quietly, but the town's veneer of normalcy started to crack when another teenager went missing, a boy named Jason Myers, known for sneaking into the abandoned asylum as a dare. Witnesses reported seeing a black van circling the streets at odd hours. Residents whispered about the Raven Man, a local legend said to abduct children to feed some twisted obsession. Mara knew legends rarely helped investigations, but patterns did. She spent nights combing through decades of old case files, unearthing reports of missing teenagers dating back to the 1970s. Each case was dismissed, explained away, or quietly buried in the town archives. Yet each victim shared something in common: curiosity about the asylum, a habit of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a family desperate for answers. The first breakthrough came when Mara discovered a series of letters hidden in the town archives, anonymous notes detailing observations about the missing children, their habits, and the family's responses. One letter was different, written in a hurried scrawl. It mentioned a new apprentice and a plan that would ensure the cycle continued. Mara's gut twisted. This wasn't just a random abductor. This was someone meticulous, organized, and possibly working with others. By the time night fell over Raven Creek, a thick fog had rolled in from the nearby mountains. Mara parked outside the asylum, staring up at the decaying brick walls. The place was an imposing structure, shuttered windows like dark eyes watching her approach. Something about it felt alive, waiting. She didn't yet know that stepping through those gates would pull her into a nightmare that had been festering in Raven Creek for decades, a network of secrets, manipulation, and a predator whose patience spanned generations. And by the time Mara left that night, she was certain of one thing: the disappearance of Ellie Parker was only the beginning. The morning fog clung to Raven Creek like a shroud, curling around lampposts and the skeletal remains of maple trees. Detective Mara Ellison's rental car crunched over wet leaves as she drove along the narrow road leading to the abandoned asylum. It had been boarded up for decades, but Mara knew from prior cases that places like this never truly slept. They simply waited. The air inside the car smelled faintly of coffee and old leather as Mara reviewed her notes. Ellie Parker had disappeared 3 nights ago, and Jason Myers the night after. 2 teenagers in a town that prided itself on safety, gone without a trace. Patterns emerged in Mara's mind, each one colder and more deliberate than the last. Ellie's notebook had been the first clue, a curious teen, fascinated by the asylum, scribbling notes about its past horrors. Then the letters in the town archives, hidden in a forgotten ledger, revealed surveillance and planning. Someone had been watching these children for years, waiting for them to venture too close to the asylum's crumbling walls. Mara parked near the ivy-choked perimeter fence. The asylum loomed, its red brick walls mottled with black and green from decades of decay. Broken windows stared like vacant eyes. The main gate sagged, rusted hinges threatening to collapse at the slightest touch. She stepped out, flashlight in hand, boots crunching on the gravel path. Every instinct screamed caution, but Mara had learned the hard way that monsters thrived on patience, and she intended to match it. The interior of the asylum was a labyrinth of peeling paint, graffiti, and rotting wood. Mara's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the remains of long-abandoned offices and classrooms. Rusted gurneys, broken chairs, and scattered files littered the floor. The walls seemed to echo faintly, carrying the whispers of decades of suffering. Mara felt her pulse quicken. She moved methodically, scanning every corner, every shadow. The building had been empty for years, but she knew better than to trust appearances. A sudden scraping noise came from the upper floor. Mara froze. Footsteps, or merely the building settling. She tightened her grip on the flashlight and edged toward the staircase, each step groaning beneath her weight. Halfway up, she spotted movement, a faint shadow crossing the far corridor. She paused, listening. Nothing. Then a soft click echoed from the ceiling above, followed by a faint metallic scent, like oil or rusted metal. Someone had been here recently. Her instincts screamed that she was not alone. Back in town, Officer Daniel Ruiz was digging through old police reports at the station, cross-referencing each missing person with newspaper clippings, asylum records, and town council minutes. What he discovered made his stomach turn. Each disappearance over the past 50 years had connections to the asylum, either directly or indirectly. Teenagers who dared to explore the building, children whose parents questioned the town's strange patterns, even a few adults who had been in the vicinity of the asylum for work or research. They all vanished. Ruiz's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he made a chilling realization. The disappearances were methodical, calculated, and remarkably consistent. No one had ever been caught, no one had ever confessed, and no one had ever been held accountable. It wasn't just a serial predator, it was an institution of terror, hidden in plain sight. Mara continued her careful exploration, moving from corridor to corridor. She entered what had once been the asylum's administrative office. Dusty files lined shelves, though many had been stripped of useful information decades ago. One drawer, however, was sealed with a rusty lock. Mara pried it open, revealing a small stack of folders containing patient records from the late 1970s. Most were mundane, medical histories, family contacts, but one stood out. It was labeled simply, Parker, Observation Notes. Her heart tightened. She recognized the handwriting immediately, the same as the letters Ruiz had found in the town archives. Someone had been documenting families, recording behaviors, marking potential targets. Flipping through the folder, Mara found notes on children who had gone missing, and disturbing entries about their interests, habits, and movements. One line chilled her to the bone. Target curious, will approach asylum grounds. Observe at night. Ensure discretion. Apprentice in training. Apprentice. Mara's stomach knotted. This wasn't just a single predator, it was a network, perhaps even generational. Someone was grooming others to continue these abductions. A loud crash echoed from the second floor. Mara froze, flashlight trembling slightly. Footsteps again, deliberate, heavy. She crouched behind a fallen desk, scanning the shadows. Then she saw it, a figure moving between the corridors, too fast to be casual. The intruder wore dark clothing, a hood concealing their face. They paused for a moment, looking directly in her direction, before disappearing into the darkness. Mara chased after, her boots striking the cracked tiles. She reached the end of the hallway, empty. The building was silent again, save for the wind whistling through broken windows. She realized the figure had been testing her, gauging her reaction. Someone inside knew she had arrived. Someone inside wanted her here. Meanwhile, Ruiz traced the latest black van sightings. Reports from residents, traffic cameras, and even eyewitness accounts painted a horrifying picture. The van moved almost nightly around the town, pausing near homes of teenagers who had shown curiosity about the asylum or been friends with other missing teens. And then there was the connection to the Parker family. Ellie had been particularly fascinated by old maps of the asylum grounds. Jason Myers had spoken about seeing lights at night, about shadows moving along the corridors where no one should have been. Mara's discoveries inside the asylum, combined with Ruiz's research, painted a terrifying picture. The Hollow Circle, or whatever name they used, was not merely an abductor operating alone. They had a surveillance network, they had apprentices, and they were patient enough to wait years to strike. Back inside the asylum, Mara continued exploring. She discovered an old stairwell leading down to a small basement. The air grew colder as she descended, the smell of mildew and rust stronger. In the corner, she found a sealed metal cabinet. Using her flashlight, she discovered a small key taped to the underside of a loose floorboard nearby. The cabinet contained journals, handwritten, yellowed with age. The first few pages were written in meticulous script, detailing disappearances, methods, and even financial notes about the families targeted. One name leapt off the page: Raven Creek Council. Someone high up had been funding, directing, and protecting these operations for decades. The journal's entries continued up to the 1990s, with references to new blood, apprentices, and continued surveillance. One note in particular made Mara shiver. The cycle continues. The apprentice is ready to assume full responsibility. Ensure discretion. The town must remain ignorant. The handwriting changed mid-page, newer, rushed, almost panicked. Unexpected visitors. The detective is here. We may need to accelerate the schedule. Mara's mind raced. This confirmed what she had suspected. The disappearances were no accident, no random abductions. This was a system, and the system was still active. Ellie Parker's disappearance was part of an ongoing, centuries-long cycle. Her flashlight flickered as she scanned the journals. One entry caught her eye, a map of hidden passageways within the asylum grounds, tunnels that led to old maintenance rooms, sewers, and nearby forests. These passages would allow someone to move in and out undetected, a perfect route for abductions. Mara copied the map carefully into her notebook. If she could trace these passages, she might have a chance of finding Ellie and Jason before it was too late. Night fell fully over Raven Creek. Mara emerged from the asylum, her clothes soaked with sweat and dirt. She met Ruiz near the car, handing over the journals. "We're dealing with something much bigger than we realized," she said. Ruiz nodded grimly. "The van, the apprentices, the surveillance, this is organized. And they've been at it for decades." Mara stared back at the asylum, shrouded in mist. Its broken windows glimmered like dark eyes in the night. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "Not until we stop them." And Mara realized that to save the missing, to uncover the truth buried in Raven Creek, she would have to go deeper than anyone had dared before. The shadows of the asylum weren't just haunted, they were alive. And they were waiting for her. Raven Creek slept fitfully under a low-hanging fog as Detective Mara Ellison and Officer Daniel Ruiz returned to the station. The journal she had recovered from the asylum weighed heavily in her backpack, not just physically, but with the grim reality of what they contained. Each page detailed decades of meticulous planning, surveillance, and disappearances, painting a horrifying portrait of a predator that was more than one person. It was a system, a network, an institution of cruelty. Ruiz leaned back in his chair, rubbing the still painful area under his arm where he'd been grazed during a minor altercation in town the previous night. "I've been reviewing old reports while you were spelunking," he said, gesturing to the asylum's journals. "And it's worse than I thought." Mara dropped her backpack on the floor, opening the journals carefully. "Go on." Ruiz spread out a series of photocopied reports and newspaper clippings. Every disappearance in Raven Creek over the last 50 years follows a pattern. Adolescents with an interest in the asylum, or anyone who starts poking around town secrets, suddenly vanish. Sometimes they are gone for days, sometimes forever, but no one notices until they are already gone, and by then, the trail's erased. Mara nodded grimly. She had suspected as much. The meticulousness of the operation meant it was more than a lone predator. This had to be a group, possibly with apprentices being trained in the art of abduction, surveillance, and intimidation. "And I've cross-referenced the latest missing teens with the old disappearances," Ruiz continued. "Ellie Parker, Jason Myers, they weren't random. Someone is targeting them specifically. And I think, I think the apprentice mentioned in the journals is active now. Mara's pulse quickened. If the apprentice had taken over, it meant the cycle was ongoing, and the longer they waited, the higher the risk for Ellie, Jason, and possibly other children. That night, Mara returned to the asylum, this time with a plan. The journals had mentioned hidden passageways that allowed abductors to move undetected between the asylum and nearby forests, town buildings, and the abandoned maintenance tunnels that connected old town infrastructure. These passages were likely being used by the apprentice to lure and capture victims. The air inside the asylum was colder than she remembered. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, highlighting peeling wallpaper and broken tiles. Each corridor seemed longer than she recalled, each shadow heavier. Mara moved with caution, remembering the figure she had seen days earlier, a hooded silhouette watching her, testing her. She had to find the passages before it was too late. After an hour of careful exploration, Mara discovered a small grate near the basement wall, partially concealed behind debris. Pulling it open revealed a narrow tunnel leading beneath the asylum. The air was damp and musty, and a faint metallic scent lingered, the same she had detected before. She crawled inside, a flashlight barely piercing the darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, narrowing at some points to a crawl space, expanding at others into small chambers. It was clear this network had been used recently. The faint scuff marks, bits of debris, and occasional discarded items indicated movement. Halfway through, she paused. Faint voices echoed from deeper in the tunnels. Mara froze, straining to listen. Two figures were speaking in low tones, their words muffled but familiar. "Move tonight. Apprentice is ready." "Parker is curious," one voice said. Mara's stomach twisted. The apprentice was indeed active, and the target was Ellie. She pressed herself against the tunnel wall, pulling out her phone to record notes silently. The apprentice wasn't alone. There were at least two others involved in the operation, guiding and training the younger member. The system was in motion, and Mara was right in its path. Meanwhile, Ruiz had been scouring the town for recent surveillance footage. He combed through traffic cams, private security cameras, and residents' home recordings, piecing together the movements of the black van seen near the homes of missing teens. "Look at this," Ruiz said, pointing to a grainy clip from a camera near the old mill. The van slowed, then paused near a wooded path. Two hooded figures emerged, moving quickly and deliberately. One appeared younger, likely the apprentice. They carried backpacks and boxes, moving with purpose as if following a plan rehearsed many times before. "That's the apprentice," Mara said quietly. "And the older figure is the trainer." Ruiz nodded grimly. "And judging by the journals, this isn't the first time they've operated this way. They've been doing it for decades. And we're lucky someone's noticed this pattern now, or the cycle would have continued unnoticed." Mara returned to the tunnel network later that night, mapping its twists and turns. She discovered a small chamber with remnants of recent activity, a camp stove, canned food, and a notebook. She lifted the notebook, flipping through pages filled with cryptic notes about observing children, schedules, and training sessions. One entry made her blood run cold. "Target tonight, Parker. Follow instructions. Ensure discretion. Apprentice must perform flawlessly." The apprentice wasn't just following orders, they were being tested. Mara realized the chilling truth. If she failed to intervene, Ellie would likely be abducted within hours. She returned to Ruiz with her findings. "The apprentice is about to act," she said. "We have to intercept before they make a move tonight." Ruiz looked pale but resolute. "Then we move now. We can't wait for backup. It'll tip them off. If we're lucky, we can trap them near the tunnel exit and finally put an end to this." They coordinated carefully, reviewing the tunnel map and identifying likely exits near the forest and the old mill road. Mara's heart pounded as she imagined Ellie's terrified face, her notes, and her last journal entry pleading with herself to be brave. The thought sharpened Mara's resolve. By dusk, they were in position near the mill, hidden among the dense forest trees. The black van appeared just as Ruiz had predicted, slowing down near the path Mara had scouted. Two figures emerged, the trainer and the apprentice, carrying backpacks. Mara signaled Ruiz. He nodded, readying his weapon. They waited silently, every muscle tensed. The apprentice paused at the tree line, glancing toward the mill. Something about the posture made Mara recognize hesitation. A young person, clearly inexperienced, aware that this operation was wrong but bound by loyalty or fear. Mara's instincts screamed that the key to stopping them wasn't brute force, it was distraction. If she could separate the apprentice from the trainer, they might convince the younger member to surrender. Raven Creek had a strange way of appearing calm after a storm. The black van was impounded, the apprentice and trainer secured, and the immediate danger had been neutralized. Yet the town still felt uneasy, as if it were holding its breath. Detective Mara Ellison and Officer Daniel Ruiz returned to the station early the next morning, the weight of the journals and the apprentice's confessions heavy on their minds. Mara spread the recovered asylum journals across the table. "The apprentice gave us a starting point," she said, her voice tight with resolve. "But this network isn't just about abducting teens. It's about power, control, and secrecy that stretches back decades." Ruiz rubbed his eyes. "I've been cross-referencing the names mentioned in the journals with old missing person reports. There are dozens, maybe hundreds, of families whose children disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Most cases were dismissed, forgotten, or buried." Mara nodded. She had seen it before in other cases, towns unwilling to confront their past, police departments more concerned with appearances than justice. Raven Creek was no different. Its quiet streets hid dark, systemic corruption. The apprentice had revealed one critical detail: the hollow network, though small, had infiltrated multiple levels of the town. Local officials, business owners, even some members of the police force had been complicit or willfully blind. This was not merely a case of a predator and an apprentice. It was a legacy of crime carefully maintained and hidden in plain sight. Mara and Ruiz decided to start by mapping connections, linking past disappearances to possible facilitators. They spent days poring over decades of reports, financial records, and town council minutes. One name appeared repeatedly: Leonard Graves, a wealthy industrialist whose family had founded the town's textile industry. Graves' philanthropy and civic engagement had made him a pillar of the community, but the journals suggested he had been using his influence to cover the hollow network's operations. Further digging revealed that Graves' family had ties to the asylum long before it closed. Documents showed donations made under the guise of medical research, funding for staff housing, and even undocumented payments to local officials. Mara realized the network was built on layers of legitimacy and deception, allowing it to operate with near total impunity. The next breakthrough came when Mara located old photographs in the town archives. The pictures, taken at community events throughout the 1970s and 80s, included both local officials and children who had later disappeared. Mara's stomach twisted as she noticed patterns: children standing close to influential figures, smiling for the camera, then vanishing without a trace months later. Ruiz peered over her shoulder. "This isn't just surveillance," he said quietly. "It's grooming. They were picking their targets decades ago, keeping tabs on families, watching, waiting." Mara nodded grimly. "And the apprentice we caught is part of a system trained to continue the cycle. This isn't over, it's just shifted to the next generation." The investigation took a darker turn when Mara and Ruiz interviewed surviving family members of missing teens. Many had been silenced by threats, social pressure, or fear. One mother, shaking as she recounted her son's disappearance, revealed a chilling detail. She had received an anonymous note shortly after reporting him missing. "Curiosity has consequences. Silence ensures survival." The note, Mara realized, was consistent with the messaging in the Hollow Network's journals. It wasn't merely a warning, it was a tool of control, designed to instill fear and obedience in families and witnesses. Mara returned to the asylum with a new objective: find hidden records or evidence that could definitively expose the network's scope. The tunnels beneath the building had already proven useful, and the apprentice had described additional hidden chambers used for storage and observation. Mara navigated the maze carefully, flashlight cutting through decades of dust and shadows. In a small chamber beneath the main floor, Mara found a cache of ledgers, detailed maps, and personal diaries belonging to the network's previous operators. Each document revealed meticulous records, names of children, dates of surveillance, coded instructions for apprentices, and payments to local officials who were either complicit or silent. Mara photographed everything, careful not to disturb the evidence. Her heart raced as she realized the scale of what she was holding. The Hollow Network had been preparing for the present day for decades, and the system had evolved to remain hidden. The apprentice, held in custody, provided further insight. "We're not just in Raven Creek," he admitted hesitantly. "There are other towns. Smaller networks, connected. They watch, they groom, they replace older members with younger ones. It's been going on for generations." Mara felt a chill run down her spine. The implications were staggering. If the Hollow Network was part of a wider system, Raven Creek was just one node in a much larger, more insidious operation. And Ellie Parker's abduction attempt had been only the beginning. Mara and Ruiz decided to confront local officials, starting with Mayor Henry Caldwell, whose name appeared in the journals as having facilitated certain operations. Caldwell's office was immaculate, the polished wood and brass fixtures a stark contrast to the darkness Mara had been uncovering. "I'm here to discuss recent developments concerning missing teens," Mara said firmly, presenting the apprentice's confessions and the recovered journals. Caldwell's expression shifted, from polite concern to icy tension. "I don't know what you mean," he said, his voice tight. "I've been nothing but cooperative with law enforcement." "Cooperative or complicit?" Mara pressed. "Your name appears repeatedly in the journals. Financial records indicate payments to staff and officials connected to disappearances spanning decades. You know exactly what's been happening." The mayor's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This network protects this town. People have been disappearing, yes, but it's for the greater good. You can't understand the sacrifices necessary to maintain order." Mara's jaw tightened. "Sacrifices? You're talking about children, innocent lives. The network has continued because adults like you refuse to act." Caldwell's hand twitched toward a drawer. Mara noticed immediately, signaling Ruiz to cover him. The mayor froze. Mara didn't flinch. "Step away. It's over." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then Caldwell sighed, shoulders slumping. "You don't know what you've stumbled into. If you continue digging, you'll destroy lives, entire families. But I suppose you wouldn't care, would you?" Mara's reply was calm but sharp. "I care about the ones you've already destroyed, and I won't let you destroy another." The confrontation with Caldwell forced Mara and Ruiz to acknowledge a hard truth. The Hollow Network wasn't just hiding in the shadows, it was embedded in the town's very institutions. Police, local government, wealthy families, all were connected, either knowingly or through fear and coercion. As night fell, Mara returned to the asylum one last time for the day, retracing the tunnels and chambers. She paused in the main hall, flashlight illuminating the broken windows and peeling paint. The wind carried the faintest whisper through the corridors, like voices from the past reaching for the present. Mara realized that the Hollow Network was not merely a criminal organization. It was a living, evolving entity, sustained by fear, loyalty, and secrecy. And if she wanted to stop it, she would need to uncover every hidden connection, confront every enabler, and dismantle a system that had been centuries in the making. The apprentice's testimony had been invaluable, but Mara knew it was only a first step. The network had layers she could not yet see, and the shadow of the asylum stretched far beyond Raven Creek. As she exited the building into the foggy night, Mara felt the weight of decades pressing down on her. She had glimpsed the past, but the present was only the beginning. The Hollow Network was still alive, still operating, and still capable of unimaginable cruelty. Yet Mara had one advantage the network did not anticipate: the truth. And with it, she would fight to bring the entire system into the light. The echoes of the past would guide her, and for the first time, Mara believed that Raven Creek might finally confront its darkest secrets. The town of Raven Creek had grown eerily quiet after Mara Ellison's confrontation with Mayor Caldwell. But beneath its fog-draped streets, the Hollow Network remained active, its influence far-reaching and its reach nearly invisible. Mara and Officer Daniel Ruiz had now identified key players within the town: influential officials, business owners, and several local families with long-standing ties to the network. The apprentice had confirmed what the journals hinted at. This was not a single operation, but a generational web of control, grooming, and manipulation. Mara knew they needed more than confessions to dismantle it. They needed proof, undeniable evidence that could expose decades of coordinated disappearances, manipulation, and the silent complicity of Raven Creek's elite. The investigation began with a systematic review of the hidden tunnels beneath the town. The asylum's basement was only one entry point, Mara suspected that multiple hidden passages crisscrossed the town, providing the network with safe access to move unseen and carry out their abductions. They began mapping every possible route, using blueprints of the old municipal infrastructure, so maps, and the apprentices' knowledge of the passages. Most led to abandoned buildings, warehouses, or maintenance tunnels. Some even terminated in private property, suggesting cooperation, or at least complicity, on the part of local landowners. "Look at this," Mara said one evening, pointing to the detailed diagram she had drawn on the wall of the station's evidence room. "These tunnels connect not just the asylum, but several homes, the old mill, and even the water treatment plant. That's why the disappearances have gone unnoticed for so long. The network had escape routes and observation points everywhere." Ruiz shook his head in disbelief. "It's bigger than we imagined. These kids never had a chance. No one in town would ever notice, until we started asking questions." Mara's gaze lingered on the map. "And we still haven't located the other apprentices. This one was caught, but there's a high probability others exist, possibly in plain sight, waiting for the next cycle." The next day, Mara and Ruiz visited one of the abandoned warehouses the tunnels led to. It was a crumbling, two-story structure on the outskirts of town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and broken fences. According to the apprentice's account, the warehouse had been used for training, storage of supplies, and temporary holding of abducted children. Mara's flashlight swept across the interior. Dust-covered crates and barrels lined the walls, some labeled with dates going back decades. The air smelled of mildew and rust. Mara moved cautiously, noting signs of recent activity. Footprints in the dust, a discarded backpack, and faint scratches on the floorboards. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where they train the apprentices, store the equipment, and probably keep records no one else can see." Ruiz nodded grimly. "We need to document everything. This is going to be the key to exposing the network." As they explored the warehouse, Mara found a hidden compartment in the floorboards. Lifting the old planks revealed a metal box containing notebooks, photographs, and more letters, the same type she had discovered in the asylum journals. These documents detailed the network's operations, schedules for surveillance, notes on specific children, payment records to local officials, and instructions for the apprentices. One photograph in particular caught Mara's attention. It depicted a group of children standing in front of the asylum, smiling at the camera. Behind them were several adults, faces partially obscured by shadows. But one figure stood out, a man whose face Mara immediately recognized from the town council archives. He had been implicated in past disappearances, yet had never been questioned publicly. "Here," Mara said, showing the photo to Ruiz. "This proves the network isn't just operating in secret. It's been using influential people to maintain its control. And some of these people are still in positions of power." Ruiz's jaw tightened. "We need to move fast. If we expose them too slowly, they'll disappear again, or worse, retaliate." Mara and Ruiz returned to the station to compile their findings. The apprentice, now in custody, was cooperative but clearly frightened. His fear was not just for himself, but for the consequences of revealing too much. He provided the names of other known apprentices and trainers, some still active, others long retired. Mara realized the network's continuity relied on secrecy, fear, and the indoctrination of younger members. "This isn't just about abductions," Mara said, reviewing the apprentices' notes. "It's about control. They train their members to obey, to recruit, to maintain the system. Each generation passes it down like a family heirloom." Ruiz nodded, which explains why the disappearances have lasted for decades without anyone outside noticing. They've embedded themselves in every aspect of the town: schools, local government, businesses. Even the police department has been partially compromised. Mara's mind raced. To dismantle the network, they would need a multi-pronged approach: arrests, evidence collection, and exposing the town's complicity to the public. It was risky. One wrong move, and the hollow network could vanish again, leaving behind more victims. The following day, Mara visited the Parker family. Ellie had been traumatized by her abduction attempt, but she was safe and eager to help. She recounted every detail she could remember: the hooded figures, the van, the tunnels, and even the instructions given to the apprentice by the trainer. Her testimony was detailed and precise, providing crucial insight into the network's operational methods. "Ellie is more resilient than I expected," Mara said to Ruiz. "Her observations could help us anticipate the network's next moves. If we act on this quickly, we might be able to prevent future abductions." Ruiz nodded. "She's our best chance at understanding how they operate on the ground level. Most of the victims' families never got that insight because the children were too frightened or already gone." Mara's next focus was on the town's financial and political structures. The journals, the apprentice's testimony, and the recovered documents all indicated financial transactions and favors had been used to maintain secrecy. Large sums of money had been transferred discreetly between the network's operators and local officials. Some of these officials had been in power for decades, others were recent appointees, likely groomed to continue the operation. Mara and Ruiz began contacting banks, reviewing transaction histories, and cross-referencing them with town council records. They discovered suspicious patterns, unexplained payments, shell accounts, and properties purchased for research or maintenance that were actually used as safe houses or training centers. The network's reach extended far beyond what anyone in Raven Creek had imagined. Meanwhile, the apprentice revealed something that sent a chill down Mara's spine. "There's a code," he said, voice trembling. "Every disappearance, every document, every photograph has a reference number. It's not random, it's a record. They track each child, each family, each movement. They know everything." Mara frowned. "And what happens when a new apprentice comes of age?" "They inherit the records," the apprentice admitted. "They continue the system. They choose the next target, monitor them, and report back to the trainers. It never stops." The implication was horrifying. The hollow network was a self-sustaining system, designed to endure. Stopping it meant more than arrests. It meant uncovering decades of hidden operations, confronting complicit officials, and dismantling a structure built on fear, secrecy, and manipulation. By the end of the week, Mara and Ruiz had a comprehensive picture of the network's operations. Hidden tunnels crisscrossed the town, safe houses were scattered strategically, and the network had apprentices embedded in the community, ready to continue the cycle. Financial records and photographs revealed the involvement of town officials, wealthy families, and business owners. The next step was clear. Mara had to expose the hollow network publicly, arrest its key players, and protect the remaining children at risk. But the final piece of the puzzle, the mastermind, was still at large. Every lead pointed to someone with influence, cunning, and patience spanning decades. Mara stared at the wall of evidence in the station's briefing room, photographs, maps, and notes pinned meticulously. "We found the network," she said quietly. "But now we need the heart. Whoever's running this, they are still out there, waiting." Ruiz nodded. "And they'll know we're coming. If they are smart, they'll disappear, like ghosts." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure they can't. We follow the tunnels, trace the money, and confront everyone involved. Raven Creek won't be controlled by fear any longer." The shadows of the past were alive, whispering through the abandoned halls, the hidden tunnels, and the foggy streets. But Mara was ready. The hollow network had survived decades of secrecy, but it would not survive exposure. And for the first time, Mara felt the stirrings of hope. The web was unraveling, and the dark legacy of Raven Creek was on the brink of revelation. The first rays of dawn struggled to pierce the fog over Raven Creek as Detective Mara Ellison and Officer Daniel Ruiz prepared for what could be the most dangerous phase of their investigation yet. The hollow network had been meticulously mapped, its tunnels charted, its safe houses identified, and several key players apprehended. But the core, the central figure orchestrating decades of abductions, remained elusive. Mara knew that whoever controlled the network held the town's secrets like a vice, and confronting them meant stepping directly into the lion's den. Their plan began with the financial investigation. Mara and Ruiz had traced suspicious transactions over decades, connecting shell corporations, private foundations, and personal accounts to individuals implicated in the hollow network. Among the most significant findings were records indicating recent large deposits to an account belonging to a corporation known as Raven Industries, a company controlled by the town's most influential family, the Whitmores. "Raven Industries," Mara muttered, scrolling through the digital ledger. "They've been funneling money to the hollow network for decades. That explains why the network has resources, vehicles, properties, even influence over officials. Ruiz grimaced. We're talking about serious money, enough to maintain an entire infrastructure for decades. Safe houses, surveillance equipment, bribes. This isn't just a criminal network. It's a well-funded operation. Mara's gaze hardened. And that funding leads straight to the top. If we want to dismantle the hollow network, we have to confront the Whitmores. They are the heart of this system. Mara and Ruiz spent the next 2 days visiting properties linked to Raven Industries, cross-referencing the locations with the tunnels mapped beneath the town. One warehouse near the industrial district had been converted into a sophisticated observation center. Surveillance cameras were connected to multiple locations, feeding real-time information about the town's residents. This is a nerve center, Mara said, surveying the room. From here, they could monitor anyone, every child, every potential witness, even us. Ruiz nodded. And judging by the journals and the apprentice's testimony, this kind of operation has been going on for decades. It's not just the warehouse, this is a system, replicated across multiple locations. Mara carefully documented everything. Photos, digital records, and diagrams would be essential when presenting the evidence. But she knew that collecting proof was only the first step. They had to be ready for confrontation, and that meant preparing for resistance. That evening, Mara visited one of the older apprentices in custody. Unlike the younger apprentice recently apprehended, this individual had been active in the network for over a decade, grooming new members and ensuring operations ran smoothly. The interrogations were grueling. I've been following orders my whole life, the apprentice confessed. The system, it's bigger than you realize. The Whitmores, they started it, built it, funded it. Every step has been orchestrated to maintain control. People disappear because they're inconvenient, curious, or resistant. Mara leaned forward. So you're saying the Whitmores have been controlling this network for decades? The apprentice nodded. And they are still in control. They've got layers of protection, and anyone trying to expose them gets silenced, or worse. Even the police department, some are loyal to them. Ruiz's jaw tightened, which explains why so many cases were dismissed. They weren't incompetents, they were complicit. The apprentice paused, glancing down at his hands. There are other apprentices out there. One of them has been following instructions to track your investigation. You're being watched. Mara's stomach tightened. Then we have to move faster. If they anticipate our moves, they can disappear, or worse, cover their tracks again. The next morning, Mara and Ruiz coordinated with the district attorney to obtain warrants for the Whitmore's properties. Their plan was to search each location simultaneously, warehouses, private estates, and offices linked to Raven Industries. The goal was to seize evidence, identify hidden tunnels, and apprehend anyone still active in the network. As the team prepared to move, Mara returned briefly to the asylum to review the tunnels and map potential escape routes. The passages had been used for decades, and she wanted to anticipate every possible route the network could use to flee or conceal evidence. Every tunnel leads somewhere, she told Ruiz. We block exits, control entrances, and we corner them. They think they are ghosts, but they are just human with resources and influence. Ruiz nodded grimly. And that's where we trapped them. The operation began just after dawn. SWAT teams, police officers, and detectives moved with precision, simultaneously raiding the properties connected to Raven Industries. At the first warehouse, Mara discovered hidden chambers containing detailed surveillance records, personal files on children in the town, and encrypted ledgers of financial transactions dating back 50 years. It's all here, she whispered. The proof we need. Ruiz uncovered a small tunnel leading to the basement of a nearby abandoned home, confirming the apprentice's claims. The passage was lined with surveillance equipment, wiring leading to the warehouse, and evidence of recent activity. It was clear the network had been monitoring them in real time. The raids continued throughout the day. At the Whitmore's private estate, the team discovered a concealed basement beneath the wine cellar. Inside were more ledgers, digital drives, and journals detailing the network's operations, including names of current apprentices and trainers still active in the town. It was the smoking gun they needed to link decades of disappearances to the family. Meanwhile, Mara coordinated with the district attorney to issue immediate protective custody orders for any potential victims identified in the records. Ellie Parker and Jason Myers were now witnesses, but there were likely others, either already in danger or at risk of abduction. This network doesn't just end with the people we've caught, Mara said. We need to identify every active member, protect the children, and dismantle the infrastructure entirely. Ruiz reviewed the digital files they had recovered. Look at this, he said, pointing to a folder labeled Future Targets. Names of children currently attending schools in Raven Creek were listed alongside notes on behavior, routines, and vulnerabilities. The network had been preparing for the next generation. Mara felt a chill. They are not just reacting, they are planning. For decades, this has been a system designed to perpetuate itself. If we don't act quickly, more children will be put at risk. By nightfall, the raids had concluded. Multiple key figures were in custody, and critical evidence had been seized. But Mara knew the operation was far from over. The Whitmores themselves had not yet been apprehended, and there were indications they had allies still embedded in the town's institutions. Back at the station, Mara laid out the evidence in the briefing room: financial records, photographs, tunnel diagrams, and the journals recovered from the warehouse and asylum. This is bigger than any case I've ever worked on, she said. We're not just arresting criminals, we're dismantling a system that's controlled this town for generations. Ruiz nodded. And we have to be ready for retaliation. The network may have others we haven't identified. They've been careful, patient, and they are desperate. Mara's mind raced. The apprentices, the tunnels, the hidden safe houses, all indicated a level of planning that suggested the network could strike again if cornered. We need to anticipate every move, she said. We need to stay ahead, or we risk losing control. As the team prepared for the next phase, tracking down the remaining active members and confronting the Whitmores directly, Mara allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Raven Creek had survived decades of hidden terror, but the town's darkness was finally being exposed. Yet even as she considered the progress, Mara felt a gnawing sense of unease. The journals, the apprentices' testimony, and the records from the warehouses suggested something more, an overarching force guiding the network, someone older, more experienced, and far more dangerous than anyone they had apprehended. The heart of the hollow network was still beating, hidden and waiting. And Mara knew that to dismantle it completely, she would have to confront it directly. That night, Mara returned to the asylum for one final survey before moving to the next phase. The tunnels were silent, dust-laden, and empty, but they carried the weight of decades of human suffering. Mara's flashlight cut through the shadows as she walked the corridors, thinking about the children who had vanished, the apprentices being groomed, and the secrets that had allowed the network to survive for so long. She stopped at a junction in the tunnels, her flashlight illuminating the peeling walls. She realized that the hollow network was not just an operation, it was an ideology, passed down like a dark heirloom. To stop it would require exposing every secret, confronting every enabler, and dismantling the system entirely. And Mara was determined to do it. Raven Creek had never felt so tense. Fog rolled across the streets like a living shroud, concealing the town's quiet menace. Detective Mara Ellison and Officer Daniel Ruiz had spent weeks piecing together the Hollow Network's operations, uncovering hidden tunnels, safe houses, and the network's ties to the town's most influential families. Yet the true heart of the network remained elusive. The Whitmores, its most powerful enablers, were still at large, and the network's remaining apprentices and trainers were scattered throughout the town, waiting for the moment to strike. Tonight, Mara knew, would change everything. The plan had been meticulously crafted. SWAT teams were stationed at multiple properties connected to the network, and Mara and Ruiz had obtained arrest warrants for the Whitmores themselves. Intelligence suggested that they were planning a meeting with remaining apprentices and operatives at a secluded estate on the outskirts of town, a mansion hidden behind dense trees, with private access tunnels leading directly to the forest. Mara and Ruiz approached the property under the cover of darkness, flanked by tactical units. Mara's flashlight illuminated the fog, casting long shadows over the estate's wrought iron gates. Every step felt precarious. One misstep could alert the network, and years of hidden operations could vanish in an instant. Everyone in position. Mara whispered into her radio. All units ready, came Ruiz's reply. His voice, calm yet tense, reflected the gravity of the moment. The mansion was eerily silent when they breached the outer perimeter. Mara's flashlight scanned the windows. Shadows moved inside. She motioned to Ruiz, and the two approached the main entrance, covering each other carefully. From the inside, they could hear faint murmurs, low, hushed voices discussing operations, schedules, and financial transactions. The network's inner workings were laid bare, and Mara's pulse quickened as she realized the scale of what was happening inside. "We need to move quietly," Mara said. "We can't risk alerting everyone. We need to isolate the key figures first." Ruiz nodded. "I'll take the west wing. You take the east. We converge in the central hall." They split silently, navigating the mansion's dark corridors. Mara passed rooms lined with luxurious furniture, paintings of past Whitmore ancestors, and offices filled with ledgers and computers, proof of decades of secret operations. Then she saw them, two figures in the east wing, standing over a map of the town. Mara recognized one immediately, Victoria Whitmore, the matriarch, orchestrating the network with cold precision. Beside her was another trainer, one of the senior operatives still active in the network. Both were unaware of Mara's presence. Mara raised her flashlight, her voice firm. "Police! Step away from the map." The Whitmore's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Detective Ellison," Victoria said, voice icy. "I wondered when you'd arrive. You shouldn't have come alone." Mara's hand tightened on her firearm. "You've been operating a network of abductions, intimidation, and corruption for decades. It ends tonight." The senior operative moved suddenly, lunging toward Mara, but Ruiz appeared from the shadowed corridor, tackling him to the ground. A struggle ensued, but Mara managed to secure Victoria Whitmore with zip ties. As SWAT teams cleared the mansion, Mara and Ruiz discovered more than just financial records and operational plans. Hidden tunnels extended from the basement of the mansion deep into the surrounding forest, confirming the network's ability to move undetected for decades. In one chamber, they found surveillance equipment, monitors displaying live feeds from various points around the town, and notebooks detailing plans for future abductions. "This is it," Mara whispered to Ruiz. "This is the nerve center." Ruiz ran his fingers over the monitors. They've been watching everyone, every family, every child. They knew exactly what they were doing. Mara felt a cold anger settle over her. The system had survived decades because of fear, manipulation, and the careful grooming of apprentices. But tonight, that system would collapse. The next hours were a blur of arrests and evidence collection. Several remaining apprentices were apprehended, including one who had been actively tracking Mara's investigation. The detainees provided details about the network's reach, confirming suspicions that its operations extended to neighboring towns and cities. "They've been training new generations," Mara said grimly. "Each apprentice is taught to recruit the next, to maintain secrecy, to follow orders without question. It's self-sustaining." Ruiz shook his head. "And that's why so many children disappeared. The network didn't just operate, it perpetuated itself." Mara's attention returned to Victoria Whitmore. Interrogation would come later, but Mara knew that the matriarch's control over the network was more than operational, it was ideological. The Whitmores had built a system rooted in fear and obedience, and dismantling it would require more than arrests. It would require exposing the truth to the town itself. Back at the station, Mara compiled the day's findings. The mansion alone had yielded enough evidence to implicate multiple high-level members of the network. Financial records, surveillance logs, personal notes, and photographs documented decades of abductions, grooming, and cover-ups. The Hollow Network's operations were finally laid bare. Yet Mara knew the investigation was not complete. The network's reach extended further than the Whitmore estate, and several key operatives were still unaccounted for. One discovery in particular unsettled her: encrypted messages hinting at outside collaborators, suggesting that the network was part of a larger regional operation. "They are not just in Raven Creek," Mara said to Ruiz. "This is bigger than we thought. The Whitmores are central, but they are not the only players." Ruiz frowned. "So there's a wider network. That means more apprentices, more trainers, more kids at risk. And it's organized, like a machine." Mara nodded. "Exactly. And we've only scratched the surface. If we don't move carefully, the network could vanish again, leaving more victims in its wake. The next morning, Mara revisited the tunnels beneath the mansion. With blueprints, maps, and the apprentice's guidance, she traced every passage, documenting connections to the town's system, abandoned buildings, and even the old mill. These tunnels had been used for decades to move victims without detection, and Mara realized they were likely still functional. "This is how they operated unseen for so long," she murmured. "Every disappearance, every abduction, they had tunnels, safe houses, and surveillance covering every angle." Ruiz, examining the maps, nodded. "And these tunnels show us exactly where they've been, and possibly where they might strike next. If we can control the exits, we can cut off their mobility and dismantle the network completely." Mara's mind raced. Each tunnel, each safe house, each record revealed the meticulousness of the network. It was more than a criminal enterprise. It was a legacy of control, perfected over generations. That evening, Mara convened with the district attorney and SWAT leadership. They reviewed the evidence, plotted additional arrests, and outlined plans to secure the tunnels and safe houses still under network control. Every piece of information brought clarity, but also the chilling realization that the hollow network's influence had penetrated every corner of the town. "We have the nerve center, most of the active operatives, and the key enablers," Mara said. "But the network is adaptive. We have to anticipate their moves and secure every potential escape route." The district attorney nodded. "This is unprecedented. We're talking about dismantling a system that has operated for decades. It won't be easy, and it won't be without resistance." Mara's jaw tightened. Nothing worth stopping evil ever is. Late that night, Mara walked alone through the fog-covered streets of Raven Creek. The quiet of the town was deceptive. Beneath its surface, shadows moved, secrets lingered, and fear still whispered through empty houses. She thought of Ellie Parker, Jason Myers, and the other children whose lives had been touched by the network. They had survived, but the network's ideology, its grooming, indoctrination, and meticulous control, still lingered. Mara realized that while the arrests and raids had struck a major blow, the hollow network was not yet destroyed. It was adaptive, patient, and still capable of influence. She would need to continue unearthing hidden connections, confronting powerful families, and ensuring that the system of secrecy could never reassemble. As the fog thickened around her, Mara made a silent promise. Raven Creek's shadows would no longer control the town. Every tunnel, every hidden room, every secret would be exposed. And the hollow network, which had thrived in darkness for decades, would face the light. The confrontation had begun, but the war for Raven Creek's future was far from over. The morning fog clung stubbornly to Raven Creek, casting the town in a muted gray that mirrored the tension in Detective Mara Ellison's mind. The raids at the Whitmore estate had delivered the hollow network its first serious blow, but Mara knew their reach extended far beyond what the arrests had revealed. Every piece of evidence suggested the network was not confined to Raven Creek. It had branches in neighboring towns, possibly even cities, each carefully managed and insulated from scrutiny. The network was like a shadow with countless tendrils, some already in motion, some dormant, and some waiting for the right moment to strike. Mara and Officer Daniel Ruiz started the day by reviewing the warehouse and mansion tunnels in detail. Using the apprentice's notes and the records recovered during the raids, they marked potential escape routes, surveillance points, and safe houses on an expansive town map. Each mark represented decades of planning, every connection a lifeline that had allowed the network to operate undisturbed for generations. "These tunnels, they're not just within the town," Mara said quietly, tracing the lines with her finger. "Some connect to service tunnels that lead outside Raven Creek. The network could move victims, resources, or even operatives without anyone knowing." Ruiz frowned. "That explains the disappearances beyond the town's borders. If they've been operating regionally, the number of missing children linked to them could be staggering." Mara nodded grimly. "And if we want to dismantle the system, we need to follow every connection, every branch, every tunnel. If we leave even one operational, they can rebuild." Their first priority was securing the safe houses within the town. A series of abandoned warehouses, properties owned by shell corporations, and old family estates formed the backbone of the hollow network's operations. Mara and Ruiz coordinated simultaneous raids, each team assigned to a location identified in the apprentice's records. The first site was an old textile mill at the edge of town. The building had been abandoned for decades, but had clearly been maintained by the network. Surveillance cameras had been installed, monitoring the nearby streets and even adjacent properties. Hidden compartments contained ledgers detailing the identities of children previously abducted, notes on prospective targets, and financial records confirming payments to multiple local officials. "This place, it's a hub," Mara whispered to Ruiz, surveying the dusty interior. "Not just storage. Training, observation, logistics, it's all here." Ruiz picked up a small black notebook, its pages filled with meticulous handwriting. These notes track every apprentice's progress, every assignment, every task completed. They are monitoring each other, ensuring loyalty and control. The raids continued through the day. Each location yielded more evidence, encrypted drives with lists of potential targets, hidden rooms for observation, and extensive financial records that tied local officials and business owners directly to the network. It became increasingly clear that the Hollow Network had embedded itself into the social, economic, and political fabric of Raven Creek. Meanwhile, Mara began receiving reports from the interrogations of arrested apprentices and trainers. One revelation in particular shocked her. The network had coordinated with affiliates in nearby towns to cover up abductions, transfer children, and maintain continuity even when investigations threatened exposure. "They've been operating like this for decades," Mara said, reviewing the testimony. "They have contacts in law enforcement, hospitals, and schools, not just here in Raven Creek, but in at least 3 surrounding counties." Ruiz's voice was tense. "Which means we're dealing with a network that's regional, organized, and incredibly careful. They've already thought 10 steps ahead of us." Mara leaned back in her chair. "And that's why we need to uncover every link, every safe house, every operative, every document. If we don't, they'll slip away again, and more children will be put at risk." Later that evening, Mara and Ruiz visited the property of a retired network operative who had been identified in the journals and apprentice notes. The man, once a trainer, now lived alone in a secluded house near the forest. The team approached cautiously, knowing that the operative could be dangerous. "Detective Ellison," the man greeted as the door opened. "I suppose you've come to finish what the others started." Mara's eyes narrowed. "We're here for information. You know about the network's operations, its safe houses, its tunnels, its targets. If you cooperate, it will help prevent more children from being hurt." The operative hesitated, glancing toward the forest. "Do you think it's that simple? They've been planning for generations. We're just pawns in a system bigger than any one of us. The Whitmores, they are only the tip of the iceberg." Mara pressed him. "Then tell us everything you know. Every connection, every safe house, every apprentice. We need to dismantle this network before more lives are destroyed." The man's eyes flickered with fear and resignation. "You don't understand. Some of them, they are everywhere. Teachers, business owners, law enforcement, even families. They've embedded themselves so thoroughly that no one suspects. And they have contingencies. If one branch falls, another continues the operations. They've thought of everything." Back at the station, Mara compiled the new intelligence. The network's reach was staggering. Dozens of safe houses, multiple tunnels connecting towns, and affiliates in positions of power who could obstruct investigations. Yet the operatives' revelations also provided critical insight. There were vulnerabilities in the network, points where coordination faltered, and operatives who were still cautious enough to make mistakes. "This is the edge we've been waiting for," Mara said to Ruiz. "If we strike now, strategically, we can collapse the network before it can regroup." Ruiz nodded. "And we have the evidence, photographs, ledgers, digital files. We can expose everyone complicit, make it impossible for them to hide." Mara stared at the map on the wall. Tunnels, properties, and connections marked in red and yellow illustrated the sprawling complexity of the Hollow Network. "This isn't just a town problem," she said. "It's a regional system of exploitation and secrecy. And now, we're about to pull the threads." The following days were a whirlwind of coordinated raids, arrests, and evidence collection. Each location revealed more about the network's meticulous operations, training programs for apprentices, monitoring schedules for potential targets, and financial transactions connecting the network to influential families. One discovery, in particular, was chilling: a ledger labeled Future Generations containing the names of children not yet targeted, but already observed, groomed, and tracked by network operatives. Mara felt a cold weight settle over her chest. The network wasn't reactive, it was preemptive, ensuring its continuity by planning decades in advance. The thought of children being watched, monitored, and potentially abducted was a visceral horror. Ruiz broke the silence. They've been watching everyone. Every child, every family. And some of the network's apprentices are probably still active, blending in, waiting for instructions. Mara clenched her fists. Then we move fast. We dismantle the network's infrastructure before they have a chance to strike again. Late one night, Mara returned to the tunnels beneath the Whitmore estate. The maze of corridors, hidden rooms, and observation posts stretched farther than any blueprint suggested. Her flashlight illuminated peeling walls, decades-old graffiti, and signs of recent activity, footprints, fresh wiring, and remnants of surveillance equipment. These tunnels, they are not just for movement, Mara whispered. They are control points, observation posts. They've been watching the town for decades from these hidden corridors. As she navigated deeper, Mara stumbled upon a sealed chamber. Inside, she found files indicating the network's connections to other towns and possibly other states. Letters, coded messages, and photographs suggested collaboration with other criminal organizations, connections Mara hadn't anticipated. "This isn't just Raven Creek," she murmured. "It's part of a larger system, coordinated, patient, and meticulously maintained. And we're only just beginning to scratch the surface." By dawn, Mara and Ruiz had mapped the remaining tunnels, identified all known safe houses, and compiled a comprehensive dossier on the network's regional operations. The hollow network's reach had been fully exposed, but Mara knew the final challenge remained: confronting the remaining leadership, ensuring the safety of potential victims, and bringing the entire system to justice. As she looked out over Raven Creek, fog rolling across the streets, Mara realized that while the town had been plunged into darkness for generations, the light of truth was finally breaking through. And though the hollow network had planned for decades, it had not anticipated one thing: a relentless detective unwilling to let secrets survive in shadow. The hidden reach of the hollow network was vast, patient, and calculated, but Mara Ellison was ready to bring it crashing down. The dawn broke over Raven Creek in a muted haze, the fog curling across streets and alleys like a lingering shadow. Detective Mara Ellison and Officer Daniel Ruiz had spent weeks dismantling the hollow network's operations, uncovering hidden tunnels, secret safe houses, and corrupt enablers embedded in the town's very structure. Yet the network's remaining leadership and the final active apprentices were still at large, their potential for harm immense. Today would mark the climax of months of investigation, the final coordinated raids designed to eradicate the hollow network once and for all. The plan was meticulous. Using the compiled maps, surveillance logs, and intelligence from apprehended operatives, Mara and Ruiz coordinated simultaneous operations on every known safe house, hidden tunnel exit, and property linked to the network. SWAT teams were stationed at key choke points, while additional officers patrolled surrounding streets to prevent escape. Mara reviewed the operation once more with Ruiz in the command van overlooking the industrial district. "Every exit, every corridor, every potential tunnel must be secured," she said. "The network has been planning this for decades. They are patient, meticulous, and resourceful. We can't underestimate them." Ruiz nodded, tension etched into his features. "And we've got to move quickly. If they suspect what's coming, they could try to disappear, or worse, take the children with them." Mara's jaw tightened. "We can't let that happen, not after everything we've uncovered." The first raid targeted a converted warehouse at the edge of town, previously used as a training site for apprentices. Inside, officers found hidden compartments containing ledgers, photographs, and personal files on dozens of children. Surveillance equipment monitored every entrance, every street, and even neighboring properties. The operatives inside were caught off guard, unable to flee. One apprentice, a young man in his early 20s, attempted to escape through a hidden tunnel leading into the forest. Mara and Ruiz pursued him, the chase silent but swift. The apprentice stumbled, tripping over uneven concrete, and Mara handcuffed him. "You've been planning this for months," she said, holding him against the wall. But it ends now. Every safe house, every tunnel, every operative, caught. Your network is finished. The young apprentice glared, fear and defiance mingling in his eyes. You don't understand. The system, it never dies. Even if you think you've won, it continues. Others will take my place. It's eternal. Mara's gaze was steely. Not this time. Not in Raven Creek. While Mara and Ruiz were clearing the warehouse, SWAT teams raided the Whitmore estate. Victoria Whitmore, the matriarch, and several senior operatives were detained. Hidden rooms revealed additional ledgers and digital drives, documenting decades of abductions, financial manipulations, and the grooming of new generations of network members. Every layer of secrecy that had allowed the network to flourish for decades was now exposed. One discovery shocked Mara: a tunnel connecting the Whitmore estate to the town's water treatment plant. It had been used for discreet movements, enabling operatives to travel without detection and monitor the town's utilities. They were everywhere, Mara muttered, even in the systems we rely on every day. Ruiz examined a ledger listing names of current apprentices and their assignments. They planned every detail, he said, even who would take over if someone was caught. It's a contingency plan that's lasted generations. Mara's mind raced. That's why we had to strike simultaneously. If we hadn't, they could have relocated, disappeared, or retaliated. The final sweep focused on smaller, scattered properties connected to the network, abandoned homes, warehouses, and the hidden tunnels beneath the town. Each location yielded more evidence: photographs, letters, surveillance footage, and instructions for future operations. Some operatives attempted to flee, but the coordination of the raids left no escape routes. In one tunnel beneath the old mill, Mara discovered a hidden room where several children had been kept under close watch, though unharmed. They were frightened and confused, unaware of the larger network controlling the town. Mara knelt beside them, offering reassurance. "You're safe now," she said softly. "It's over. The people who hurt you won't be able to touch you again." The children clung to each other, eyes wide, absorbing the reality that their nightmare had finally ended. By midday, every known safe house and tunnel had been cleared, and all remaining operatives were in custody. The hollow network, which had persisted in Raven Creek for decades, was finally dismantled, its reach severed, its leadership arrested, and its future plans exposed. Mara and Ruiz returned to the station to review the accumulated evidence. Files, ledgers, photographs, and digital drives had been catalogued, providing an unprecedented record of the network's operations. The information would be critical not only for prosecuting those involved, but also for understanding how such an insidious system could thrive unnoticed for so long. "They've been systematic, patient, and ruthless," Mara said. "Every abduction, every manipulation, every threat was planned meticulously. It's horrifying." Ruiz nodded. "But it's all here now. We have the proof. The network can't hide in shadows anymore." Even as the immediate threat was neutralized, Mara knew the investigation wasn't over. During the raids, encrypted communications and coded messages suggested that the hollow network might have collaborators beyond Raven Creek. While the town's operations had been dismantled, the potential for connections to other towns and networks was real. Mara pored over the digital drives, her eyes scanning for patterns, names, and locations. One folder in particular caught her attention: external operations. It contained photographs, documents, and coded notes indicating cooperation with other criminal entities in neighboring regions. They weren't just local, Mara said to Ruiz. They were part of a larger system. "We've dismantled the heart in Raven Creek, but the limbs may extend far beyond this town." Ruiz grimaced. "So this isn't the end. There could be others, elsewhere, continuing the cycle." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure their networks are exposed. Every connection, every affiliate. No one gets to operate in shadows again." Meanwhile, survivors and families began to come forward. Mara facilitated reunions between children and their families, each reunion a mix of relief, tears, and lingering trauma. One young girl, previously abducted, whispered to Mara, "I thought no one would ever find me. Thank you." Mara knelt, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on her. "You're safe now, and we'll make sure it stays that way." The emotional impact of the raids hit Mara hard. Each child rescued represented lives saved. Yet each revelation also underscored the depth of betrayal, secrecy, and manipulation that had persisted in the town for decades. As night fell, Mara and Ruiz compiled the final dossiers on the Hollow Network. Every operative arrested, every safe house secured, and every record collected was documented meticulously. They prepared for the legal proceedings that would ensure the network's leaders were held accountable, and the evidence would serve as a blueprint for preventing similar networks elsewhere. Even so, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that the Hollow Network's influence extended beyond what they had uncovered. The coded messages, the financial traces, and the operational methods suggested an organized, patient system capable of adaptation and evasion. Mara stared out over the fog-covered town, thinking of the children who had been lost, the apprentices who had been indoctrinated, and the families whose lives had been forever altered. Raven Creek had endured decades of darkness, but tonight, it had a chance at light. "We've struck the heart," Mara said quietly to Ruiz. "But the network may have limbs beyond this town. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." Ruiz nodded, exhaustion and resolve etched into his face. "One step at a time. Tonight, Raven Creek is safe. Tomorrow, we uncover the rest." The Hollow Network had been shattered, its leadership captured, and its operations exposed. But as Mara surveyed the quiet streets, she realized that the final chapter, truth, justice, and the uncovering of every hidden connection, was still unfolding. For the first time, the town's darkness had been confronted. But the shadows hinted at more secrets yet to emerge. The dawn over Raven Creek was quiet, almost eerily serene, as if the town itself had been holding its breath for decades and was now finally exhaling. Detective Mara Ellison stood on the roof of the police station, surveying the streets below. The Hollow Network had been struck down, its leaders arrested, its tunnels sealed, and its safe houses dismantled. Yet the victory felt incomplete, a shadow of unease lingering at the edges of her mind. For years, darkness had thrived in Raven Creek, and Mara had learned that evil rarely existed in isolation. The first priority of the day was securing the remaining evidence and ensuring the safety of potential victims. Families reunited with their children, and children who had endured captivity were slowly beginning to process the reality that they were finally free. Emotional reunions filled the station with a mix of tears, laughter, and silent relief. One young boy, previously hidden in an abandoned warehouse, hugged Mara tightly and whispered, "I thought no one would ever find me." Mara swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. "You're safe now," she said softly, "and we're going to make sure it stays that way." Ruiz, standing beside her, added, "We've documented everything. Every operative, every tunnel, every transaction. The network can't hide in shadows anymore." Yet Mara knew better. There were still threads unpulled, connections untraced. The Hollow Network had been meticulous, patient, and adaptive. Even in dismantling its Raven Creek operations, she suspected they had allies elsewhere, ready to continue the system's work. Her suspicions were confirmed when the digital drives recovered from the Whitmore estate were decrypted. Among the thousands of files, Mara found coded communications suggesting coordination with affiliates in neighboring towns and even other states. Letters between network leaders detailed instructions for apprentices and operatives who were still active, emphasizing secrecy, patience, and loyalty. They weren't just planning locally, Mara said, eyes scanning the files. This network was designed to be resilient. Even if Raven Creek falls, other branches can continue the operations. Ruiz frowned. "So we've dismantled the heart, but the limbs might still exist elsewhere." Mara nodded grimly. "Exactly, and that means our work isn't over. But first, we expose the full scale here. We bring every secret to light, and we give the town closure." Over the next week, Mara coordinated public briefings with the district attorney, local media, and law enforcement. The scale of the Hollow Network was staggering. Decades of abductions, financial manipulation, and systematic grooming of apprentices. Families were shown evidence linking the network to influential figures in town, including officials, business owners, and educators complicit in covering up disappearances. The revelation shocked Raven Creek. Trust had been shattered, and the town grappled with the knowledge that the Hollow Network had been operating in plain sight for decades. Yet, for many, the exposure was cathartic. Long-buried fears were acknowledged, secrets were finally spoken aloud, and survivors began reclaiming their narratives. As Mara reviewed the evidence one evening, a discovery in the Whitmore estate files made her pause. Hidden in a folder labeled External Collaborators were references to a shadowy figure known only by initials, MC. The documents suggested MC had been coordinating with the Whitmores and other key operatives to expand the network beyond Raven Creek. "Who is MC?" Mara muttered. Ruiz leaned over her shoulder. "There's no record of them locally. They might be the unseen hand controlling multiple branches, possibly even the origin of the system." Mara's mind raced. This figure had been careful to remain invisible, leaving no digital trace, no financial footprint. But their influence was evident in the network's meticulous operations, long-term planning, and ability to survive for decades despite raids and arrests. "They've orchestrated everything from the shadows," Mara said. "And they may still be active, watching us, waiting for a chance to rebuild." Amid the ongoing investigation, Mara spent time meeting with survivors and their families. Many were reluctant to speak, burdened by years of trauma and secrecy. But slowly, long-buried truths emerged. Neighbors who had suspected something but were silenced, family members coerced into complicity, and survivors who revealed acts of bravery that had gone unnoticed. One woman, previously abducted as a child, recounted the manipulation she endured. "They taught us fear," she said. "They made us believe the world outside was unsafe, that no one could protect us. It took years to understand the truth, and even now, I'm not sure I fully can." Mara listened, her chest tight. "You survived," she said firmly. "You endured, and your voice matters now. You help others understand, prevent this from happening again." The survivor nodded, tears streaming. "I just hope no one else has to go through what I did." The final phase of the investigation involved tracking the remaining financial and operational networks linked to the Hollow Network. With the help of federal agencies, Mara traced payments, property ownership, and communication patterns that extended far beyond Raven Creek. Each lead revealed more about the scale of the network and the shadowy figure of MC, whose involvement suggested the Hollow Network might be part of an even larger criminal enterprise. Mara and Ruiz realized that dismantling the network in Raven Creek was a monumental achievement, but it was just the beginning. The network's infrastructure was sophisticated, its ideology deeply embedded, and its ambition limitless. In the quiet of the police station, Mara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought of the children she had saved, the families reunited, and the network's leaders finally facing justice. Yet the presence of MC, the hidden architect, reminded her that evil rarely exists in isolation. Ruiz approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined," he said softly. "But I can see it. You're still thinking about what's out there. That shadow we haven't caught yet." Mara accepted the coffee, her gaze distant. The Hollow Network has been decades in the making. Even with the arrests, there's more to uncover. But for now, we've given this town its first taste of justice in generations. Ruiz nodded. "And we'll keep chasing the rest, one step at a time." That night, Mara walked through the fog-shrouded streets of Raven Creek. The town was quiet, but the memory of darkness lingered in every alley, every abandoned building, and every hidden corner. She thought of the tunnels, the hidden rooms, and the apprentices who had once moved unseen through the town. As she passed the edge of the forest, her flashlight caught movement, brief, almost imperceptible. A figure watched from the shadows, vanishing before she could approach. Mara's pulse quickened. The Hollow Network may have been dismantled in Raven Creek, but someone, or something, remained. She clenched her fists, determination hardening within her. "We exposed everything we could," she whispered, "but we'll find the rest. We'll stop them, no matter how deep the shadow runs." In the weeks that followed, the trials of the Hollow Network's leaders brought long-overdue justice. Families were compensated, survivors began therapy and recovery, and the town slowly started to heal. Yet Mara never stopped investigating, following leads, and tracking patterns that suggested MC and other hidden operatives might still exist. The Hollow Network in Raven Creek had been shattered, its leaders captured, and its darkest secrets revealed. But Mara understood one fundamental truth: evil, especially one as calculated as the Hollow Network, never truly dies. It waits, patient and silent, until someone uncovers it again. And Mara Ellison was determined to ensure that the shadows never regained their grip on Raven Creek or anywhere else.